Isabella Carcel, the youngest daughter of the influential Duke of Carcel, whom even the royal family does not dare to touch. If she wants something, she will not rest until she gets it. And if she cannot get it, she destroys it so that no one else gets it. She has a bad character. And the treasure that the girl wants to get the most is the girl. The crown prince, Christopher von Idris, is here. And somehow he won her heart. Beautiful appearance. Strength capable of lifting one to the very top of the empire. Maybe it's because he is the owner of the precious stone, the heart of the earth, which is located in the dungeon of the palace. All of these reasons are wrong. Although she wanted the heart of the earth, Isabella wanted something much more special, namely Christopher, who turned into a wolf every full moon due to a curse. In other words, she did not desire the man, but his wolf form. Isabella, enchanted by the rare silver fur and bright golden eyes, decided to take the place of the wife of the crown prince, whom she had previously had no interest in order to get Christopher. After all, then she will be able to own it alone. However, Christopher already had a lover. Wolves are attached to one partner for life. He couldn't leave his love and choose Isabella instead. Eventually, she decided to change tactics. If she can't be with him, she will make him come to her himself. She just needs to remove the prince from the place of heir to the throne. The most important thing is to find his flaws and weaknesses. Isabella had no problem destroying what she was obsessed with. She used a crazy method that would never have occurred to a normal person and drove Christopher into a dead end. This is a mania that is so frightening that it gives you goosebumps, a terrible desire to possess, even at the expense of one's normal mental state. They were characteristic features suitable for a villain, and that is how Isabella met her death. At the hand of Christopher, whom she so desired to have. Like every villain, she disappeared from history after justice was served. The servant turned to her and asked if she was okay, to which Isabella replied, "Of course." After all, she became that very Isabella Carcel. Not only did she suddenly take the place of the stranger, but she also took the place of the villain in the novel, the villain who cut the throat. In the end, somehow the real Isabella died, and she ended up in her body. Although she doesn't know why this happened, she knew one thing for sure. In reality, she died and still remembers it clearly. The car that hit her while she was crossing the road, and the pain that tore through her entire body. That's why she was very surprised when she woke up. There wasn't a single scratch on her heavy body. But most of all, she is surprised when she sees this face. It's been a week since she became Isabella, but she still can't get used to it. If you look at it like that, she really is a beauty. Even if the eyes are a little gloomy, it's most likely because of the atmosphere. It's quite scary. Or it's just the effect of the villains. The maid asked if she could fix her hair a little, but she liked everything, so she asked to continue. Then the maid began to braid her hair. Isabella gradually gets used to this life. After all, she still won't be able to get out of this body. She uses this chance without regret. Because, apart from that sudden incident, Isabella's life is ideal. She was born into an incredibly wealthy family. In other words, she can now become immensely rich without doing anything, something she could never dream of in real life. And she's not sure if she felt sorry for having to play the villain, or if it was some kind of correction. But her story has not yet begun. The plot of the story will begin in a month. The main character, Hannah, will temporarily lift the curse from Christopher in wolf form. Because of this, Christopher will become attached to the girl, and then they will start an affair. Ultimately, Isabella will interfere in their relationship. Afterwards, she becomes madly obsessed, but she does not intend to interfere with the plot of the story and will live there forever. At least that was her goal. Isabella stood with a frightened expression on her face. Her brother Oliver brought a wolf because she loves them so much. And not just black, but silver. The only silver wolf in the empire that she knows. The damned prince. Christopher, with bright yellow eyes. She couldn't believe why he was here. Maybe she would die earlier than in the original story. Isabella sat on the sofa, deep in thought. She looked at the key, and only one thought was running through her head. How did this happen? Isabella clutched the key in her hand, remembering her brother's words. The more ferocious the wolves are, the more fun it is to tame them. Let him try to tame him. And who needs to be tamed? In any case, it doesn't make sense now. She felt like she could fix everything. It wasn't Oliver who initially caught Christopher, but Isabella, the owner of this body. Isabella, a keen hunter, discovered a rare silver wolf and captured it, but she had no idea it was Christopher. Although, given Isabella's character, she would have caught him even if she knew for sure. In general, she met Christopher before the main character Hannah. However, until the storyline began, she didn't know that this wolf, Christopher, had a curse placed on him that would start to take effect when the full moon rose. Having fallen for the Empress's trick, he drank poison that strengthened the curse and was no longer able to turn back into a human. That's why Isabella never met Christopher outside of his wolf form. But the most important question is, how did she know that he was that wolf? It's most likely because of his bright yellow eyes. Observant Isabella, seeing his amazing eyes, immediately realized that he was the one she was looking for. Isabella was happy that she found the lost wolf, but it didn't last long. Seeing Hannah next to him, she felt angry and jealous that she couldn't have him and eventually went crazy. Knowing better than anyone else that their meeting would be the beginning of misfortune, he did not even go near the hunting grounds. When the lady invited her to hunt, she refused under the pretext of illness, because it would have been better never to meet until Oliver captured him. The fate of the original is inevitable, no matter how hard you try. He just threw a nuclear bomb in front of her. Isabella sighed heavily. She didn't understand why he did this to her. The wolf growled very loudly. Then she ordered him to be quiet. At first, she was so scared that her legs were shaking, but people adapt faster. He was caught by another person, so it's unclear why he's barking at her. Now she is more offended than scared. Isabella sat in front of him and watched. Apparently, he didn't like her, but she didn't really like him either. And why she is talking to him, she also doesn't understand. After imprinting with Hannah, he retained his sanity even while transforming into a wolf, and she doesn't know how it was before. Then she asked him to let you go, but he only continued to growl. If he promises not to eat her, she will let him go, and also asked him to nod his head if he understood. Well, the wolf just stood in his aggressive stance. She asked him to calm down, because she was not going to do anything. He came closer to the cage. Isabella can't say whether this creature has intelligence or not, but she knows one thing for sure. For the sake of her neck, she should never let him go. At least she could let him go after he became human again. The problem is that only the main character is able to break Christopher's curse, and she will appear only in a month. They have to live together for a whole month. He turned his head away indignantly, as if he understood what she said. If she were the main character, she would have immediately dispelled the curse. If she had the ability to cleanse, this terrible situation would not have happened. The main character, Hana Manhwa, was an outstanding sorceress and showed an extraordinary talent for purification. And this purification, of course, also worked on the poison that struck Christopher. When a month had passed since the wolf was captured by Isabella, Christopher found an opportunity to escape from her, freed himself from the clutches of Bella, wandering aimlessly around the north in the form of a wolf. He met Hannah. She immediately realized that he was cursed. She cleansed him of the poison and returned him to human form. But the timing was unfortunate. Perhaps he spent too much time in the body of an animal. Christopher, who followed only his instincts, felt Hannah, reveling in the seductive pheromones, and then a scene of the genre 18+ happened. Isabella doesn't have the ability to cleanse, so without the experience of human life, her scenes would be completely different. A scene from a horror movie full of screams, blood, and mints. Since she's not Isabella, she has no reason to be overly obsessed with Christopher. It would be nice if she could just let them meet. When the time comes, he will find the main character himself, as in the original. From then on, he will be under her temporary protection. Isabella will protect him for a month, and then send him to the owner. You need to imagine that she is raising a puppy, because it will be more convenient. Here she noticed that he had serious wounds. Wounds left by the assassin sent by the Empress. Wounds from Oliver, even wounds from the electricity in the cage. Looking at this, it's hard to blame him for being aggressive. She decided to cure him first, and maybe that would bring them closer together. Isabella asked him to wait patiently. He seemed to have calmed down a little, but it was not to be. He started growling and barking again. She canceled her praise and said, "What a cur!" She returned holding a plate of food in her hands. She carefully moved it towards him and told him to eat it. Isabella began to watch him. It would be nice if he were always so calm. As she came a little closer, he growled. At first he was so wary that he didn't even look at the meat, but now he doesn't look at her. He had changed a little. Isabella spent most of her time with Christopher. There was nothing to do anyway, and to kill time, she would get closer to him. 3 days passed, but he simply got used to her as a person who gives him food. East or west, everywhere the one who feeds is the best. She did this in the hope that in response to her care, he would trust, and his perception would definitely change. From being an annoying and noisy meat, she became a good meat that feeds him meat. But she's still meat. She needs to become not meat for him, but a person. Dark days are ahead. She will need to do everything possible. But still, something has changed. The frequency of his barking decreased. The deafening barking that hurt her ears died down. Not because she was feeding him. Anyone who saw him would think he was starving. He must have realized that his barking was only causing him unnecessary stress. He had behaved quite decently when he was being treated recently, although several shots of tranquilizer had not brought him down. In any case, now is the quietest time of the day. What is the speed of his recovery worth? It is almost healed already. Isabella also decided to go and eat. When she entered the dining room, she saw Oliver. He arrived today, Oliver. This is Isabella's second brother, the one who recently forcibly handed the wolf to his sister, the culprit of everything. She asked why he had come, since he was never seen in his own house, and this was the first time he had been here since he had forcibly handed Christopher over to her. Never one to be stuck at home, Oliver is a wanderer at heart. In the life of Oliver, the second son of the Duke of Carcel, no one interfered. Because he was not the successor, he had a strong free spirit. But differently from Isabella, he wandered there, going wherever his eyes looked. Because of this, he didn't do well in the original either. Oliver asked if she had named the wolf. If you think about it, she really does call him, hey, or just Wolf, and didn't even think about giving him a name. But her brother thinks it's a must. Since the wolf is now hers, she will be the one to call him. No one would have thought that Her Highness, Lady Isabella, would be embarrassed by any name for the wolf, but it was he who brought him here. Oliver asked if I should take him away. It looks like he can take the wolf. He has an even worse character than Isabella. If he takes Christopher, he will haunt and torment him, just like Isabella in the original story. Never let Christopher find a mate. Oliver caused a lot of problems, so he was kicked out of the family. After all, it is not known whether he is capable of taking a life without hesitation. The family will be safe, but Oliver will definitely meet a sad end. Isabella said she would raise him, so don't even think about touching him. He'll die if he touches him. She grabbed his face and shoved a piece of meat into his mouth. Why did you drink a glass of wine with a serious face? There is nothing beautiful about this shiny face. Its flaw is its excessive kindness. Eventually, over lunch, she decided to choose a name, but she couldn't concentrate. When the wolf saw her, one could tell from his expression that he was tired of her attention. She pulled up a chair and sat down opposite him, as if the air around her froze. Isabella will give him several selected names, and he must answer if he likes any of them. She cannot call him His Highness, any more than she can call him Christopher. She liked the name Belish, but from his expression, it was clear that he was extremely against it. It suddenly occurred to her that his name, Christopher, could be shortened to Chris. It seems that he liked this name too. Now she will call him Chris. She had a request for him, so Isabella asked him to listen to her carefully. She only gave him a name, but it seems they have already become closer, and his hatred of Christopher seems to have subsided. Isabella released him from the cage. Christopher began to look around. The servants and Isabella stood to the side and watched. It was clear from her expression that she was very worried about whether everything would be okay. The maid looked at her with incomprehension. No matter how much she thought about it, it was too much. Isabella asked Grace to vacate the next room. It would be the wolf's room. The maid asked her again. After all, this is very dangerous, since it can break out, and it needs to be strengthened so that this does not happen, and do it at the highest level. They ended up having to combine 2 rooms to make it happen. The maid asked what to do about it. She suggested fastening the muzzle. Isabella forgot to put it on because she was tired of taking it off and putting it on every time she fed, but she thinks it will be okay. It doesn't come out anymore. It's a pity that we had to put him to sleep to buckle him up. Everything went smoothly. He'll use it later, on a walk. The servants stood with their mouths open and were in complete shock at what they heard. But she can't keep him locked up all the time. If he hadn't attacked, we could have gone right now. Isabella asked for another collar and a locket with a name. Chris's name. And her name and address should be engraved on the back so he could return. The maid asked if anything else was needed. There were people who wanted it. She assumed to kill. Grace doesn't understand that even an elite assassin won't be able to finish the job. The rival, the Empress. Grace must have beheaded before she even got close. Rumors of a silver wolf in their castle. That's a problem. They're far from the capital, so rumors don't spread instantly. It would be a completely different story if the Empress had carefully searched for Christopher. If she finds out Christopher is here, she will send an assassin to get rid of him or demand that he be taken away. Christopher won't lose to the killer, so there's nothing to worry about. But we can't allow contact with her. He hates things like this and hopes that everything will go smoothly. Although she was forced to take responsibility for the protagonist, she is not going to give him to the Empress. She needs to take care of him before meeting the protagonist. In any case, Isabella regrets it, even if he is a nasty dog. But she does not want him to suffer in the clutches of the Empress. When she decided to bring him a bowl of water, he rushed at her aggressively. Then, I forgot and asked, "Well, why is he barking again?" After all, she didn't give him such a command. She removed a little magic from the cage so as not to harm him, and he became very self-confident. First of all, Isabella is his owner and protector, so he must listen to commands, but it was all in vain. Christopher continued to growl and bark, and everyone even had to cover their ears. The maid ran to her to check if everything was okay. Then, Isabella screamed that she was his mistress, and he should shut up and obey her. In fact, even her nerves are already giving out. She can't stand it anymore. But Christopher seemed to enjoy it. Oliver burst into the room, shouting for Isabella to shut up her dog. She turned to him with a displeased face. They are undergoing training, so he needs to leave. But what kind of training is this when all he does is bark? Oliver handed it to her himself, and now he's angry. Now Isabella is praising him. Let her rip that bastard's eardrums. Oliver covered his face with his hand. It seemed as if his head was about to explode. There are now 2 dogs in the house, and why did he pick it up and give it to her? The castle was in complete disarray, but I don't know why. But at least I'm happy that now Oliver is in despair too. It would be great if this method worked. In a desperate situation, she picked up some books for herself. From adopting a puppy to training, my naughty dog. What should I do? A great dog starts with a great owner. Master of the dog world, turning any ferocious dog into a gentle lamb. A best-selling author and a teacher for dummies. Isabella believed in the author, hoping that he would help her tame Christopher's deafening bark. It seems like they are both cursed. Even if you read for 100 days, you won't be able to apply anything in practice. Perhaps she has no talent for learning. When given the command paw, he might bite her hand, so she initially tried the command sit. But instead of this command, he just started barking. From the expression on her face, you could tell she had lost all hope and was begging him to sit down. Christopher kept growling, so she just decided to give him the bone. She got angry, she calmed down, she begged, she tried everything. And the next thing she knew, Christopher was off the leash, and another week passed. Belatedly, she tried to restore order, but her authority was already under Christopher's tail. With this approach, they will never go for a walk. Now he doesn't even answer, he just ignores. All hope that they will be able to establish a connection is gradually fading. She will have to send it to the heroine as is in a month. She lay there and thought about nothing. But then I opened my eyes, and the question arose in my head. Is it really necessary to do this in a month? She jumped out of bed and decided that she could start looking now. The maid was just about to enter the room, and food for Chris was ready. Isabella said that she was going for a walk and was feeding the wolf herself today. Before leaving, she looked at him one more time. He may be a rotting piece of shit inside, but he's still handsome, so he needs to be fed. She doesn't even know where to look for Hannah. She has no information about where she was before arriving north. There was even an idea to send someone to search, but most likely they will hardly be able to find her, because Hannah travels to places where her skills are needed. It is for this reason that she never stayed in one place. In addition, she is good at hiding and running away, so there is a high probability that she will not be found. Isabella knew it would be difficult. Suddenly she heard screams, "Save me!" There was fear on her face. She didn't know what was going on. The only option was that Christopher had broken free, so she ran towards the screams. The servants fell to the ground. Christopher's chain was broken. Isabella couldn't believe her eyes. There was fear in her eyes. But most of all, I don't understand how he managed to get out. At that moment, she understood, even though she had praised him for his beauty until now, when those bright yellow eyes looked at her. No matter what Isabella tried so far, they couldn't get close. She was still just a piece of meat to him. The guards ran up to her. Grace's maid and brother Oliver were also moving in her direction. Isabella didn't know what to do. Her body was hard as stone. She couldn't move. The brother and the maid screamed, "Isabella!" Christopher was flying straight towards her. She was completely at a loss. Then she clenched her fist and hit him with all her strength. Christopher didn't expect such a strong blow. But Isabella apparently didn't expect this either. The brother and the maid stood in shock. Christopher just lay there and didn't move. Isabella has an exceptional fighting talent, a talent that is only found once every century. To some extent, ball control is also ideal archery, not to mention shooting weapons. She even knows how to handle a mace, and her innate sense of combat was as good as Leonard's followers. Although Isabella had a rather nasty character, the family had high hopes for her, even the elders, although they were unhappy with Isabella's behavior, which is why they clung to her at every step, still admired her genius, so they tried to pacify her. Finding something interesting was more important to Isabella than being a genius or the strongest. Although Isabella was only causing trouble, the highly respected man had to bite his tongue and take his hands off her. The Duke and his wife thought that these were just childish pranks of their daughter, and to put an end to them, they sent her to Jito at the call of the king. Left alone, Isabella wandered throughout the north like an unbridled foal. Christopher stood up and brushed himself off. She had the feeling that he was just testing her. Isabella didn't know that she was so strong. Everything happened very quickly. Isabella walked up to him and touched his neck with her hand. She shouted, "Stand still!" And she also ordered the maid to bring the muzzle. Somehow they managed to button it up. At some point, Christopher pushed Isabella away with his head, and she fell to the ground. The wolf raised his paw and tried to step on her. Then she kicked him with such force that he again flew back several meters. He kept his eyes on her as he flew. Isabella won this fight. It even seemed to her that he might not be able to walk again. She picked him up, threw him over her shoulder, and carried him into the castle. She is ashamed that she still trembled so much in front of him. Even though she carries Christopher in her arms, she doesn't strain herself at all. Apparently, she's that strong. Oliver folded his hands in front of him and said, "This is my little sister, wonderful." He had to stay to see one dog defeat the other. Apparently that's all he can say to his little sister, who just fought a huge beast. Oliver said that she is a beast herself. If she hadn't been carrying Christopher, she would have caught up with him and kicked him in the ass. Because brothers don't talk to their sisters like that. But she wasn't going to waste time sorting things out, especially with this idiot. In the corridor, Isabella met a maid and asked her to bring a doctor to Chris's room. When they entered, Chris was quite nervous. She put him back in the cage. As it turned out, the lock was not broken, and now the question arises as to how he was able to get out. But Christopher just looked at the floor with a guilty face. Isabella smiled and said, "Oh well, she hopes he doesn't think of her as food anymore. Now, he must understand that she is his mistress." After the interrogations were completed, the culprit of Christopher's escape turned out to be the maid who brought him food. Among the toys given to Christopher, there was something very valuable. The maid opened the door wanting to take this thing, and Christopher ran away. After learning the whole story, Oliver insisted that the maids cut off the hand. She did so without knowing the main thing. The maid was in danger of serious injury, so in the end, she quietly quit herself. Because of Oliver's character, there is a possibility that the punishment will happen behind the scenes. Without her knowledge, she did not have so much time to waste on the fired maid, so this matter simply passed her by. She saved her life and let her decide for herself how to survive. Isabella reached out and asked Christopher for his paw. A whole week of training had already passed by now. Christopher simply barked, and Isabella looked on and was touched. Then he came up to her and put his paw on her hand, and she in turn praised him. Then she put a plate of meat on the floor, because he deserved it. Christopher began his meal with great pleasure. Training is progressing well. Isabella noticed that Christopher had gained weight, and now they could finally go out for a walk. He definitely needs to shake things up, especially cut off the fat. Otherwise, he will soon become a pig. After these words, Christopher began to bark. It's as if I understood the words about cutting off the fat. She apologized to him and told him that he could eat as much as he wanted. Isabella just wants him to lose the fat and appear handsome in front of the main character. She asked him to stop because he wanted to hurt her. Isabella walked over to take the muzzle. If he wanted to go out, he had to endure it. But Christopher just shook his head, showing with his whole appearance that he didn't want to wear it. With this muzzle, he will become a kind puppy. As soon as they put it on, they immediately went for a walk. Christopher lifted his leg to do his business. Isabella knew it was a wolf, and sooner or later it was bound to happen. She also noticed that he was constantly looking back. At that moment, when he turned away out of awkwardness, she remembered a moment from the book. Looking at the owner as if apologizing means protecting the defenseless owner. She turned to him with the words that he should not worry, because she was able to protect him. Christopher didn't look back again. It seems like when she looks, he feels ashamed. Isabella shouldn't look too hard. At that moment, Christopher tugged on the leash. He ran at incredible speed, as if he saw something. Then, looking up, Christopher began to bark aggressively. He ran to that place because he saw a crow on the tree. Isabella tried to calm him down, but Christopher had no intention of listening to her at all. She didn't understand what was wrong with him. So I took the initiative into my own hands and decided to drive the crow away. At that moment, she had a bad feeling. She shouted again for the crow to go away and not torment him. Christopher watched the bird fly away, but his aggression did not go away. If it were not for Isabella standing next to him, he would have rushed to catch it. She was trying to calm him down. Isabella began to tell the maid about the crow, and how Christopher went crazy when he saw it. The maid suggested that most likely he just wanted to hunt her. Because he is an animal, he was locked up, and he was very stressed, not having the opportunity to hunt. Grace may have been right, but she herself felt somehow uneasy when she saw this bird. Another maid opened the door. She could not find the words to describe what was happening. It turned out that he had made a real mess in the room. Christopher just looked at Isabella with a guilty expression. She assumed he had been bullied by crows as a child, but if not, he wouldn't have looked so anxious. Isabella tried to calm him down. She said that everything was fine. She opened the cage for him to come out, and she opened her arms, showing that she only wanted to hug. But Christopher flew out and rushed past her at lightning speed. She smiled, thinking that it was a dog after all. But Christopher just rushed into her room, jumped on the bed, and waited for her to come. For Isabella, it seemed very sweet, but the maid took it in a negative way. She said, "What a nasty brute." She asked him to get up, but she really wanted him to promise her that he would sleep peacefully and she would let him stay. The maid was still afraid, because he had already run away and behaved quite aggressively. It was too risky, but she completely forgot that she had invented something stronger. Grace began to think of options. What if he attacks her while she is sleeping, and suggested at least putting a muzzle on him? But Isabella refused, because it would be stuffy for him, and he wouldn't be able to sleep in it. Chris knows his place, so everything was in order. Then the maid would be nearby. Oliver was surprised that Chris was now spending time with her all the time, but really only at night, even though it's daytime and he's lying right at her feet. "He's just a cutie," Isabella said. He asked where Isabella had gone, who had been whipping the animals to make them stronger. But she seemed to be reborn. She realized how disorderly she had lived before. Now her priorities had changed, and she would live decently. Oliver doesn't recognize her because he thinks it's abnormal. She is upset that her brother is talking like that, and she ordered Chris to bite him. He snuck up and started growling angrily in his direction. But Oliver was just joking. There was a knock on the door and the words, "I am the master," and he was allowed to enter. Isabella immediately understood who it was. It was Baron Simon, the vassal who dominated the duchy. He was downright surprised to see her, since they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Suddenly, his gaze fell towards the wolf. Simon hadn't seen him before. Christopher was heading towards him angrily. Baron Simon, instead of the eternal wanderer Oliver, and Isabella, who constantly gets into trouble. He is the real bearer of power in the duchy. Tired of his grumbling, Isabella ignored his greetings and sometimes got angry. But she was not the same Isabella anymore. Christopher continued to growl at him. She tried to calm him down, because he was her ward, and there was nothing to worry about. Most likely Simon came here on business. That look of his gave everything away at once. This crazy duchess is raising a dog just like her. Here's what he thinks, and other services of the same opinion. He cleared his throat and said, "Well, mister, this is the mine he was talking about." Simon placed a huge, glittering stone on the table. Isabella couldn't even believe her eyes. The last time he reported on diamonds was a week ago, and this stone is the last one for now. There was a mournful atmosphere in the room. Oliver said it was a useless stone, so Isabella asked what he was carrying. This is a magic stone, which means it will bring a lot of money. Oliver and Simon's eyes immediately lit up. Magic, a magic stone. Isabella was surprised that they didn't know about magic yet. In the original work, the duchy was famous for its magic stones. She thought they already knew. They assumed that the magic stone must be blue. Blue, processed stone. And this stone is a nugget. A wizard she knew told her about it. Simon remembers last year they sponsored a wizard who was showing off his rare gem. That one was similar, but this one was bigger. If they don't believe her, they can check it themselves. They decided to do just that. Isabella turned to the Baron, who apparently thought she was completely untalented. When he thinks about all the money he spent to compensate for the damage he caused, he is glad that she has changed lately. The conversation took a different turn. Everyone was tense. She guesses why he is behaving like this. Christopher began to yawn, and Isabella noticed it. She immediately realized that he wanted to go out. Simon stopped her. Because she should know something, it seems like there is something left to grumble about. There are rumors that His Highness, the Crown Prince, has disappeared. Then Oliver said that the prince is running around here and there very well. If his older brother says this, then it's not just a rumor. It must be assumed that the problem is significant. Another problem was that Oliver wasn't very keen on him. If he doesn't return in a month, he's not sure whether to hold the young lady's coming-of-age ceremony here. Then Isabella remembered that her birthday was coming up. But for some reason, they both reacted with caution. They thought she would be angry. But she herself said that she was reborn. Isabella and Christopher headed outside. Originally, the coming-of-age ceremony was supposed to be a grand affair in Jito. Because of the prince, it had to be paid for by the estate. If it had been the same Isabella, it would have already destroyed everything. But for her today, this event has no significance. The approach of the coming-of-age ceremony only means the approach of the original events. It's not long until Christopher's transfer day. Soon he will be able to return home. As soon as Hannah arrives, everything will fall into place. Isabella walked and said, "I won't sell." Simon asked her to just let him take a look, to which she replied that she was busy and that he should not bother her. The reason they argue with each other is because of Oliver. That damn brother left everything on her and ran away. She pretended to be smart in vain, and her tongue, the enemy, thanked her for the discovery, but left the export issues to her. The idiot. The weather was beautiful. There was a basket with balls on the ground. Isabella took one in her hand. Then she swung and threw it, saying, "Chris, catch it." All the sand flew into Simon's face, but he wants to quickly figure out how to avoid it. Christopher brought the ball out and looked at it with displeasure. Her opinion coincides with Simon's. She asked him not to come anymore, to which he replied that this could not happen. Then Isabella asked why that was. She knew about the magic of the stone, which no one else knew, and she was the one who found all the rational clients. No one is more suited to the role of responsibility than she is. But Isabella doesn't know anything about business, and can't do anything. She only found a candidate for the processing plant for Oliver's sake. She didn't think that it would lead to such a result. She dug her own grave. Simon looked at her and said that it was enough for her to express her opinion. But if that was the case, then let her take care of everything right away. The only thing that was important to her was to fully spend the remaining time with Christopher. Isabella turned around and saw Chris nowhere to be found. She only noticed how he jumped over the fence and disappeared from sight. Even at that moment, she was speechless. One of the swords flew over the fence. He can escape after Hannah comes north. There is no point in escaping now. If he escapes, it will be a dog's life. Simon fell to the ground. Christopher ran away in the blink of an eye, acting so quietly that she let her guard down. Isabella started screaming at him, "Come back!" Various thoughts swarmed through my head about what if Christoph shot down the crew? What if he gets lost and loses consciousness? Or an evil person will catch him and torture him? Suddenly, Christopher jumps back and returns with the ball. He runs up to Isabella and spits the ball out in front of her feet. It was the ball she threw. He didn't run away. It was because of the ball. She thought he hated her. It turns out she was wrong, like an idiot. Isabella praised him because he was so cool. He didn't give up and brought her the ball. This was the first expression of affection. She dreamed that they would become closer, in a friendly way. Unlike the day she made a mistake, this time she definitely felt his trust in her. Beautiful, kind, her naughty puppy. Christopher jumped and knocked her down. They fell and lay on the grass, hugging each other. Simon walked over to her to make sure everything was okay. Isabella was surprised that the ram had not left yet. He said that he needed to give her something, and then handed her a folder. Isabella began to study carefully. To sum up the contents of the document, the manufactured accessories with magic stones were to be delivered to the jewelry store belonging to the Guild of the Duchy of Carcel in Jito. Simon asked her to read the back as well. Mana stones are difficult to handle and should be entrusted to an experienced craftsman. However, it comes at a cost. Even with high pay, not every master will take on the job. It's too expensive, and their family needs to get as much profit as possible. It will become her pension fund. Then she remembered about Asila and said the name out loud. She asked Simon to contact Asila's workshop. The name is not very well known. She is an experienced craftsman. Countess Gurel had one necklace last year for the celebration of Her Majesty's birthday. It was made by her. Simon was surprised. He understood what necklace she was talking about. This necklace was famous enough for the Baron to immediately understand what was being discussed. The only necklace in the world, beautiful and small, despite the fact that it was a magical instrument. It is so well known that rumors have reached the far north of the duchy, but she remains anonymous. Isabella knows this because it is a jewel. Jewels are beautiful, and the original Isabella is crazy about beautiful things. When Isabella heard rumors about the Countess's necklace, she immediately began to question her people in search of the name of the master. And the cost will also be reasonable. But she doesn't like being the center of attention, so it won't be easy to get a contract. She's already been rejected. If it weren't for Asila's outstanding abilities, she would have died already. Simon said he would arrange everything, like a military leader going to war. Isabella released him with a forced smile. She would like him to never come here again. He turned around, never having seen the Duchess smile before. With such a desperate and demanding voice, she called the wolf to her. It was not a voice of desire to possess, but a voice of genuine concern and concern. Everyone is walking at this age. Isabella just stayed there a little longer. She will grow up to be worthy. He thought that she was an immature girl who did not know the world and looked at her through dark glasses. It would be nice to train her in management next time, Simon thought. Isabella just wanted to die already. The Baron was too persistent. I've been stalking her all day. This behavior is annoying. How much more will I have to suffer, she thought. Christopher lay down next to her, as if supporting her, and she thanked him. Even the dog, that is, the werewolf Christopher, sympathizes with her. He was able to somehow express this with his face. She needed to sleep quickly. She wished him good night. Christopher started barking. It was too noisy for her. She wanted to ask him to be a little quieter when she opened her eyes. The wolf tried to protect her from some ill-wishers. She jumped up and screamed, "Killers!" A man in a black cloak reached out to her. She covered herself with her hand. At that moment, Christopher ran up to him and threw him aside. He turned to her and barked. She apologized. Now was not the time to get lost. She took her sword. Then she swung and hit the man. A huge pile of dead people lay on the bloody floor. 10 killers burst into the room. She had just killed one, and Christopher had 4, leaving 5. Isabella asked who sent them. Do you want to test the power of her puppy? The 2 men looked at each other. One of them had a dagger in his hand. She asked again who wanted her puppy. Since they were silent, what could she do? She would have to kill them all. She was sleeping peacefully when suddenly all this wildness happened. She wiped the blood from her face. Then she noticed that Christopher was looking out the window, as if something was bothering him, or he was trying to show something. Come closer, and forgot to go out onto the balcony. A crow was sitting on a branch and looking straight at her. This was the same defense that she drove out of the tree on a walk. It looks like the Empress. She was spying on them. Christopher got angry because he knew that the crow was the eye of the Empress. She still doesn't know who she's dealing with. Isabella runs inside and throws her sword. She took a gun and shot straight at her. The first shot hit her, and she fell to the ground. Isabella didn't think the crow was watching her. She wondered how it knew Christopher was here. It was her mistake that she guessed. Knowing that the Empress used her familiar to manipulate birds, the familiar, a magical theriomorphic spirit serving the witch, was unprepared for this due to her complacency. She walked up to Christopher. He didn't look so good. Then she hugged him and said that everything would be fine. She saw a scratch on his side. He was wounded. Blood was running down his fur. Isabella took it and began to wipe it. Christopher got hurt protecting her. Who knew he would help her like this? She didn't even notice until she heard barking in her sleep, like she was losing her mind. She sighed heavily and said, "It's his mistress's fault." Christopher came up and buried his face in hers. Something pricked her. Bella didn't even notice, but it seems she got hurt too. This is the first time Christopher licked her face. Maybe he is worried. She praised him and also asked him not to worry, because he saved her. He rolled backwards, something she had never seen before. It seems to be because of the Empress, but she will protect him no matter what. Suddenly, Christopher spoke up, asking how she knew the Empress was the culprit. For a second, Isabella was speechless. She didn't expect that in his wolf form he could speak. At one point, he stood on his hind legs and tried to jump on top, but she stopped him. Her dog speaks, but he is not a dog, but a wolf. Isabella began to remember the past. Was it in the original, being a wolf? He was a real beast, so there was no human intelligence in him. Even after imprinting with Hannah, he could not speak. It was as if this world had gone mad. Embodying the villain, she raised Christopher and was like sitting on a time bomb. That Christopher didn't even speak. And now reason has awakened in him. He bared his teeth, revealing his fangs, and moved closer. "I'll ask again." His voice sounded low and threatening. With one powerful paw, he pressed against her shoulder, pressing her, his hot breath burning her skin, and a yellow fire burning in his eyes. Then, with a sharp movement, he threw her to the floor, without loosening his grip. "How did you know that this was the Empress?" He growled right in her face, so close that every word echoed like a rumble in her chest. Without thinking, Isabella swung her fist and hit him in the face with all her might. The wolf flew back to the wall, its fur ruffled, but she immediately gasped. "I was just scared." Her hands were shaking. "I'm a terrible housewife," she whispered, covering her face with her hands, treating him like a dog. Yes, it was no longer a dog. But what tormented her most was one question. How could he speak at all? He doesn't know. This is his first time. But he will have to ask questions for the third time. So he asks her to answer normally. How did she know that it was the Empress? She replied that it was because of the crow. Everyone knows that crows obey the Empress. She had spied on them before, and she had thought it was suspicious. But she hadn't expected to send assassins. And of course, she hadn't thought at all that Christopher had thought it was suspicious either. Isabella asked if he was by any chance the Empress's wolf, because all the assassins were aiming at him. He replied that she shouldn't mutilate him, otherwise he would vomit. He can make such a grimace and really looks like a human. Although he is a human, she would have to pretend she didn't know who he was until he revealed his identity. Even under threat of death, she wouldn't dare tell that she raised a wolf, knowing that he was the crown prince. It would seem too suspicious to anyone. I turned to her, Isabella Carcel. She turned around and looked at him questioningly. She was surprised that he knew her. The Duchess is very well known as the mad dog of the Carcels. Her presence means that she is in the Duchy of Carcel. Whether he is lucky or not, how can one say? He paused, then continued more seriously. Christopher has something to tell you, and she might not even believe it. But he is the crown prince of this empire, Christopher von Idris, and now he is under a curse. At this moment, his voice sounded firm and confident. Isabella did a perfect job of feigning shock, her eyes wide as if she was hearing this for the first time. Inside, she was already dying from awkwardness about how to properly address the prince, who just yesterday was your dog. Her thoughts were confused, and her tongue was almost tangled. Apparently, she will die of awkwardness, constantly getting confused about the degree of politeness. The Duchess is now the only one he can rely on, and she should take it much easier, but she can no longer believe what happened in the courtyard and what the wolf says. And he is so familiar with her, and that is why she doubts that it is he. The Duchess is sweet, but her character is harsher. He asked how he got into their dukes. Isabella was a little worried, because Christopher remembered absolutely nothing. He seemed to smile, if you can say so, and asked what the problem was. There was a slight mockery in his voice, but his eyes remained serious. Isabella folded her hands in front of her. Pretending to think how lucky it was that he didn't remember anything, flashed through her mind. If only he knew how he actually ended up here. If he found out what had been here before. She barely held back a nervous sigh. Now he realized that she was his mistress, and it seemed he took it for granted. Even if she gets arrested for this, he won't say anything. Her second eldest brother brought him here, wounded. He brought it intentionally, but even under threat of death, she wouldn't say that. The second one is Oliver. He became curious. They didn't raise him to eat him. How can he even say such a thing when she raised him with such love? She gave him the best quality meat. He slept on the softest pillow. Every day they went for a walk. There were so many problems while she was raising him, although he doesn't know it. It all sounded good. But there were rumors about the Duchess's vices. He became somehow different. Her cutie disappeared somewhere. Now she sees only a grinning wolf in front of her. Forgotten, she folded her hands in front of her chest and asked if he wanted her to kick him out. His answer was negative. Then she asked if he was okay. When he wanted to answer, she covered his face with her hand and gestured for him to be silent, as the servants were coming. The whole crowd burst into the room. They are on time. She was going to call them anyway. And as they see, the room is too dirty, even though it is the middle of the night. But she asked them to clean up. Isabella was perfectly fine, but Chris was injured. So she asked for a doctor. The maid saw a scar on the face of a national treasure. It urgently needs to be treated. She was embarrassed by the words, "What kind of national treasure is this?" and also asked not to say that again. This level should be enough. You have to be at the level of a holy relic to want to be treated, the maid said. It seems the guard heard something. Isabella was very ashamed. Her face was known throughout Jito, but she didn't understand what a treasure it was. She agreed and said to treat her. The maid would take care of her. No matter how strong Isabella is, meeting the Baron, the raid of assassins, and even the talking Christopher, she is unable to stop shaking. He had one more question. After the healer returned, Christopher began asking her how many days he had been here, and how things were going in Jito after his disappearance. She answered the first two questions honestly, but was already ready to die from fatigue. Isabella turned to him, at which moment Christopher jumped. He must understand that now His Highness is her dog, and he has a nice leash. Now he is her property. It is difficult to claim ownership at the first meeting. She took care of him for almost a month, so she has every right to do so. Therefore, this is the mistress's order. She asked to continue tomorrow and plopped down on the bed. Isabella fell into a deep sleep. She was too tired after such a stormy night. But Christopher heard something completely different. He heard that her temper was tyrannical and incorrigible. Who to kill this time? It was so bad that the rumors reached his battlefield, so he knew how serious it was. But rumors are always exaggerated. When it came to her younger brother Leonardo, her face became hard. But she was far from a tyrant. This voice and warm attitude, she did not even think of suppressing and dominating over it. He says they've been living together for about a month now. Maybe it's all because of this. Now he is her property. It was a kitten bite. What an interesting woman. Christopher looked again at her sleeping. The crown prince couldn't sleep on the worn-out dog pillow, so he lay down next to it. Isabella heard some noise, opened her eyes. Christopher was standing above her. He scared her a lot, but she didn't understand why he was behaving like that. It wasn't even 10 o'clock in the morning yet. Apparently, she had a dream or something happened while she was sleeping, and he became a wolf again. She'll go crazy, confused about where Christopher is and where Chris is. Suddenly, his mouth opened, and he quickly closed the distance between them, so fast that she didn't even have time to dodge. Sharp fangs sank into her lip, biting through the tender skin. Warm blood immediately appeared on the surface, and Isabella froze in shock. Christopher narrowed his eyes and began to slowly lick the scarlet drops with his rough tongue. There was some kind of eerie tenderness in his movements. Isabella looked at him in horror. Why did he suddenly do this? Her eyes wide open in horror. She got angry and asked what he was doing. He just said it worked and was very pleased with himself, after which she forgot to hit him on the head. He asked if it was too cruel, as if all he cared about was biting her lips when she wasn't even awake yet, and also expecting him to apologize. Christopher bit because he was hungry. He was joking. That was not the point at all. When he woke up, he couldn't speak, so he woke her up. But her lips smelled very delicious. It seems like he has forgotten his place. Isabella looked at him angrily. Perhaps he should show again who is who. It probably works when he tastes her blood. Yesterday and today, he found his voice when he licked her blood. Come to think of it, it actually happened after he licked the blood off her cheek. According to him, her blood has some special power. Perhaps the gift of purification, like Hannah's. But if this were true, then he would become a man. That's why he says Duchess. Christopher wishes he could lick her blood. It's as if he's mocking me, although outwardly he's a wolf. But inside he's a man, a human being. It makes no difference to her. Even if he looks like a wolf, she doesn't feel any excitement at all. It would be a problem if he was worried about the dog's proximity. However, the next time he needs her blood, let him bite his finger. No need to slobber on her lips. He lowered his head, because he was already kind enough to try not to hurt her. This kind of look on Christopher's face excites her. She asked if he wanted more. He said that would be nice. Isabella feels like a cheated idiot. Isabella took the dagger and pierced her finger. And then she brought it to Christopher, and he began to lick the blood. He licked it so thoroughly, as if he was eating something tasty, and it was very strange. Isabella asked what he was going to do next. First, he needed to contact Leonard. In the current situation, only her blood relative, Leonard, can believe in Christopher's curse. When they finish, he will give her everything she wants. She is his faithful dog. She would do anything for her friend right now. Isabella wrote a letter from Christopher's words about how he accidentally ended up in the duchy and why her brother urgently needed to come. At that moment, I even felt a little sorry. She turned away and placed her hands on the table. She took Christopher's paw and said that we needed his seal. They put a seal on it. It looked a little strange, but it seemed to work. Now they are colleagues and in the same boat, so from now on he should call her Isabella. They even shook hands. While he is bound to the curse, they need to become close friends. Isabella handed the letter to the butler and asked him to send it to her brother Leonard. And it was very urgent. There was a look on her face that he noticed early. The young duke was very angry after the night attack on her. The sounds of their night's suffering could be heard throughout the castle, which is why it was so noisy in the morning. He knows that she always refuses, but today they received a lot of really good medicine. He didn't have time to finish speaking. She interrupted and said that she would drink it unconditionally, let him bring it. He will bring them every day, because as they say, take care of your health from a young age. If Oliver cared about her wounds, it's strange that he didn't even visit her. Isabella found him on the roof of the castle. She tried to touch him, but he pushed her hand away. She heard that he was worried about her, but for some reason, he didn't come himself. The situation is a complete mess. He had a very displeased face. Oliver made the knights run. It seemed like they were about to lose consciousness. Isabella asked why he was chasing them like that. Rats snuck in while they were sleeping, so he chases them away. And he's also worried that she went outside after the attack. This time he will say confidently, dogs are better than people. From today on, she will be accompanied. Isabella began to refuse. He was surprised that after such an attack, she didn't want to. Oliver noticed the cut on her lip, then asked what kind of creature did it. She said that they were fooling around with Christopher. Oliver was outraged that he was bitten by his own puppy. He was gone for a long time, and now everything is lost. Everything. And this, Her Highness, Isabella Carcel. She has become so soft. Now she walks around bitten by her dog. At that moment, she covered her ears and said that she understood him, to which he replied, I wish I had said so right away. After her defeat by Oliver, she had to return to the bedroom with an escort. She doesn't care if the knight stands at the door of her room, but she won't be able to talk to Christopher that way. Isabella turned and told him, You are free, but he replied, Not at all, miss. Then she told him that he could rest in the next room when she was in her room. She would call him if she needed to go out. That was an order. But he went into her room with her. She didn't really want to use this method. But what could she do? So she screamed, Go away, right now. He was scared, but he understood her. Apparently, I should have done it this way right away. Christopher looked at her a little strangely. He can't believe it out loud, because he didn't expect her to be attentive to a knight who must fulfill his duties. But she is just who she is. She asked if they had changed his bandage. Why should he do such unpleasant things himself? All his subordinates had disappeared somewhere. Everyone was so fierce that no one dared touch him, so much so that he didn't allow his wound to heal. So she was responsible for his food, walks, and even toilet. And it looks like she was doing a good job of it, but in reality she just hit him hard. At first she was struggling with the character of this wolf. But now, looking back, it became a dear memory of Christopher. She valued him, the wolf, very much. And really, she valued him madly. Treasured him like her own life, in fact. And she paid with her life. You can't make mistakes. Just as Isabella was about to treat the wound, she noticed that he had healed himself. She asked about such an ability, but he would like such a convenient ability. Then she remembered that she had given him her blood. Under these circumstances, it seems more likely that her blood has healing powers. Isabella wasn't supposed to have such a skill. The ability to heal will appear only in the main character, but definitely not in the villain. It probably wouldn't work on humans, if it were possible. But her body wouldn't have any scars, so the power only works on Christopher. Whether she likes it or not, she can't shake the feeling of deep connection with him. She noticed that he was interested in her because he asked how her lip was. If such a scratch had hurt her, she would not have had the last name Cartcell. Isabella stroked his head. He pulled back a little. He didn't care whether she stroked him or not, but he wondered why she was doing it. She answered because he is handsome. There have been problems lately, because Christopher thinks she is a good person despite their close relationship, and he has reason to think so. Simon ran into the room and asked what kind of creatures dared to attack the lady. He said that he wanted to get rid of them, perhaps because of the appearance of Baron Simon, relations with whom had recently softened. Isabella turned to him and said that they couldn't fight openly. Then he replied that he could also hire assassins. Baron Simon is a powerful man in the duchy. He could not stay away and took the attack to heart. Christopher increasingly thinks that her villainous reputation is just a rumor. Alan, who was initially wary of disturbing her, now increasingly irritates her with his appearance. Today they go for a walk, just the two of them with Christopher. Isabella pointed to the side and told him to wait there. Alan thanked her for this and happily headed to the indicated place. Isabella wondered how such a stupid guy got into the Knights of Carcel. Christopher offered to tame her. He thinks that Alan will obey her. But you can forget about that, because she already tamed one. He was also a fierce type, although in fact, that fierce type was not Christopher. Leonard was due to arrive today. She looked at Christopher and realized she hadn't bathed him in 3 weeks. She turned to him and said that he needed to tidy himself up. The rumors weren't lying. He thought she was a good person. But she turned out to be so cruel. Christopher's fur was all matted with mud. The water was very dirty. It was as if he had lost his virginity. He was talking some nonsense, because she apparently accidentally touched him while washing him in the bathroom. In fact, it was as if he had never tried to mate, to lose his virginity simply by touching. He was so pure that he did not look like someone who had rushed around the battlefield. Christopher was outraged, because you can't just talk about mating anywhere. It's like she has no bones in her tongue. Isabella began to joke, saying that she would take care of it and find him a suitable female. He took every word Isabella said too personally, talking about shame and morality. She poured water on Christopher and said he should be ashamed to look at her all wet. They finished their water procedures. Christopher shook himself and splashed Isabella with water from head to toe. She took a handkerchief and began to wipe her wet hair. This was his revenge. Christopher sat on the floor, raised his head, and looked at the ceiling. As it turned out, there were too many drops that were flowing down. The rest will dry outside. Isabella walked, shaking all over from the cold. Suddenly, Leonardo's brother called out to her. For some reason, she thought Leonard looked like Oliver. Leonard Carcel, Isabella's older brother. Oliver giggled as he approached her and asked her if she was playing in the water. His underwear was visible. He asked not to insult his eyes and to change quickly, at which point Leonard gave him a good slap on the back of the head. Oliver was right, which is why Christopher stared at the ceiling. Isabella looked at him and asked if he saw anything, but he began to deny everything. Oliver even flinched in surprise. It feels like he's sleeping because this dog is talking. The voice seemed very familiar, as if His Highness the Crown Prince was standing in front of them. Then Christopher replied that he had not changed at all. He still lives like a gentleman with white hands. Oliver got angry and quickly ran for the blanket. Then he covered Isabella with it and told him not to look. As Oliver said before, all men are wolves, but he gave it to her himself. But he thought it was a real wolf. Leonardo, saying, "Enough," moved them away from each other and gave each a task. Isabella should go to her room and change her clothes, and Oliver should stop screaming, wash up, and go downstairs. Isabella looked at Leonard and asked if he could dry His Highness's wool, because if he delayed, he would fall ill. Christopher began to nod. Leonard said he would dry it. Oliver turned and told Isabella to put on a black dress. A very black dress. Absolutely black. When I forgot to come back, he met her. He was so pale that she thought something had happened. Most likely, it was because he realized that he was hunting the crown prince. He doesn't remember anything, so there's no need to cause trouble or say anything unnecessary. He may be a hooligan, but the bullets in the prince's body will scare even him. Isabella didn't expect him to actually dry it. Christopher sat on the floor, his white fur shining, showing all his superiority. Isabella's brother took very good care of him. It was unbearable for him. Since everyone is gathered, His Majesty must also join in. They all sat down opposite each other. There was something wrong with Oliver again. He was acting like this even though he knew Christopher's true identity. Isabella asked if it mattered that Oliver also knew who he was. Well, they would have to live together for a while. There was nothing they could do. He would only trust the Carcels, and no one else. Just as Oliver was about to shout something, he received another slap on the back of the head. Leonardo was interested in how this happened. Christopher explained what happened to him, starting with the situation when the Empress poisoned him, to the story about the effect of Isabella's blood and the desire to mate. Leonardo specified that when he drinks the Duchess's blood, his mind returns, but his wounds are also healed. They were silent for a moment. Isabella herself does not understand why this happens. Leonardo suggested that if his wounds are healed, then it might also work on people's wounds. They were curious and wanted to see if it would work on people. Isabella asked which of them wanted to be the test subject. Oliver immediately pulled back, saying that he didn't want to drink her blood. And how was it even possible for her to have such a good ability? Isabella started walking up to him and saying that she was going to prick his finger. Leonardo took the blade and made a cut. Isabella thought there was no need for so much blood. Oliver said that only a little bit of blood was needed, to which Isabella replied that if they wanted to pour blood into the cup, they should have enough. She put the glass of blood on the table. Leonard looked at him carefully. Then he took a small sip. Apparently, it is of no use to people. Oliver screamed that the bleeding needed to be stopped, so she gives it to Christopher. She just doesn't want to waste it. Martha should be arriving soon. First, they need to check if they can remove the poison the Empress used. She walked into the room, greeted everyone, and introduced herself. Her name is Marta Terran, the only sorceress in the elite division created by Christopher, one of the few who knows about his curse. It's me, created by combining existing poisons with invented ones. That's why you shouldn't play with them, of course. She's not the main character, so she can't remove the curse. She asked if she could take some blood from her, but Isabella knew it would be no use. It would make no difference, since the reason why His Highness's curse was not lifted was because the Empress used a special poison. It follows that the curse will be lifted if it is removed from the body. If the poison is removed, the prince will return to the body of a man. But when the moon rises, he will again turn into a wolf. The Empress knew about this, so she sent assassins. If they show up again, Oliver will take a hostage and torture them until they confess. There is only one way to escape the curse that has been passed down from generation to generation in the imperial family. You just need to meet your companion and spend your whole life with him, and Christopher's companion is Hannah Manhwa. First, they need to get rid of the poison. She knows a mage who specializes in cleansing. There is a wandering sorceress named Hannah Manhwa. You just need to find out where she is, and then she will help Christopher. The original will already be destroyed. They made a mistake by tracking down Christopher on their own. Now they have no choice but to find Hannah themselves. It was a little strange, but Oliver supported Isabella too. They need to find her, and Christopher will stay here for now. But he had better move to a safer place. But no one will dare touch him while Isabella is with him. Isabella would occasionally get lazy and skip training, and she would slit the throats of all those rats. Even if he hadn't asked her, she would still be in the case. Leonardo reached out and stroked her head, saying, "Well done, Isabella." She felt awkward. A red blush appeared on her cheeks. This is the first praise she has heard in 6 years. Isabella froze in one position. Then Christopher asked what was happening to her. She sits thoughtfully for a while and keeps touching her head. Isabella took and pushed his head away from her, but he just wanted to ask, and she immediately began to go so far, pushing away and not letting him get close to her. Remembering how he bit her lip, She unconsciously removed her hand. It had been a long time since anyone had stroked her hair. They are brother and sister with Oliver, but they do not make unnecessary shameful movements. The Duke and Duchess kept their distance from them. As in her first life, until her death after early childhood, no one stroked her like that again. Christopher sat with a serious face and listened attentively to what she was saying, and seeing how important it was to her, he decided to do the same. He put his paw on her head, simply because he had to. Isabella even began to fidget, because it was as if he was pulling out her hair. But this was the paw of her beloved Christopher. She pulled his muzzle closer to hers and said that she would no longer treat him like a dog, because it was wrong. Then Isabella moved even closer, hugged him warmly and said, "My handsome Christopher." He wondered how often she called him handsome and kind. At that moment, Isabella even stepped back. It seemed like he remembered something. It seemed to her that he didn't remember. It just sounded like something that had already become habitual to him. She turned to him. "Your Highness?" and raised her fist up as if hinting. Then Isabella asked if he remembered anything. At this point, Christopher felt rejected and wanted to run away. Maybe it's instinct. He needs to be careful. Remembering that she called him a mongrel, she thinks he'll be very angry. Isabella called him handsome and began to stroke him. He felt so uneasy that he said how stuffy it was. Leonardo came over to talk to Oliver. He asked him to tell him how it all happened, and if he noticed the lie, he would make him run 30 laps around the gym. Oliver caught him only because Isabella wanted to raise a dog. Leonardo also asked what else he did, which turned out to be shooting at him. But he really didn't know. If he hadn't brought him here, he would have died there, Oliver said. He was also interested in what Isabella was doing, since it could turn into a big problem even if she just swung a whip. He replied that she had done nothing. Oliver understood that he needed to protect his sister. Isabella and Oliver are said to be birds of a feather, hedonists with impulsive personalities, sister and brother carefully hiding from each other when the other had problems. And problems happened often. She gives him first-class food, and in every sentence he hears from her, Christopher this, Christopher that. She treats him, walks with him, and even cuts his claws, all by herself. But this became inappropriate when it was discovered who he is. "She's done a lot, so there's no need to slander her," Oliver said. "Isabella has changed a lot. She stopped arguing with everyone, no longer torments the servants. Besides, this business with magic stones began thanks to her." He gave in, and the Baron coordinated his actions with Isabella. He adores her now. Even when she expresses her opinion, he claps like a seal. The Baron seems to be busy trying to sign a contract with Asila, or something like what Isabella was talking about, but it's still nice. He is now much more interested in her than when she was dangerous and unreliable, so much so that he had to quit his job, move to a neighboring kingdom, and live at home. Oliver said not to touch her just like that, because you can come to the wrong conclusion, because they haven't seen each other for so long. With questions running out, Oliver decided to leave. Leonardo just stood there and watched him go. While he was away from home, something changed. The best solution would be to just observe. Isabella picked up a comb to brush Christopher, running her hand through his silver fur over and over. Leonardo watched them carefully, a slight tension visible on his face. Isabella asked if he wanted to say something, but he just asked her to continue. She felt awkward continuing under his gaze. Isabella saw that Christopher wanted to sleep. She suggested waking him up in an hour so that they could go for a walk. "Now we need to figure out whose bed it is now, hers or Christopher's." At first he dozed because he was on guard, but knowing that it was definitely safe next to her, he fell into a deep sleep. Now she begins to wonder whether this relationship was her evil destiny, whether it is possible to build a trusting relationship this way. Just as Isabella wanted to leave the room, Leonardo asked her to sit down. The first question was what happened to her, but she only replied, "Nothing, except perhaps the need to take care of His Highness." He thought for a moment, put his hand on his face, said, "It's just that," and fell silent for a couple of seconds. "We've heard a lot of good things about her lately. Isabella has changed her lifestyle and her thinking. Now she is a kind person. Oliver has noticed this too." The maid came into the room to give Isabella a cup of hot tea. She had a very frightened face and her hands were shaking. Isabella noticed the worry on her face. Her hand shook so much that the cup of tea fell right at her feet, and the maid began to apologize and fuss. Isabella felt guilty. Apparently, she had in vain brought her to such a close look. The maid ran out of the room. She really has changed. He didn't imagine that this could happen in his absence. His parents will like it, and he, of course, is also very happy about it. Isabella assumed he had taken something, but he really meant it. Leonardo stood up, extended his hand, and placed it on her head. Isabella froze. As it turned out, this was just a habit of Leonardo's. When he does this, she feels awkward and doesn't know how to react. That same evening, her blood was analyzed, and the results were received. Martha said that if a monster drinks her blood, the body will be filled with energy and the mind will clear. The blood is so thick that even a small amount can heal wounds. The smell is also sweet, so if a monster smells it, it will run towards him. Simply put, her blood is an aphrodisiac and a tonic for monsters. It's no wonder that when monsters see her, they go crazy and rush to her. She often suffered from this as a child, and the wolf also ran to her. Christopher said earlier that she smelled nice. His Highness's wines are demon blood, so it has an effect. As Marta said, Christopher has demonic blood in him. His ancestor was the first demon to set foot on human soil. He married a woman, and they had a child. The child, born from the mixed blood of a demon and a human, possessed exceptional intelligence and strength. The child knew how good he was and believed that he had the right to be emperor. Therefore, in the end, he usurped the throne. The half-breed child was the first emperor of the Idris family. In the process of seizing the throne, he killed the spirit wolf that protected the imperial family. The spirit wolf in anger put a curse on the emperor. On the night of the full moon, he is cursed to turn into a wolf and kill his loved ones. The emperor thought that this would pass in 2 weeks, but the curse did not go away. At first, he returned to human form after 15 days, and at some point, he began to remain a wolf longer and longer. Eventually, he no longer turned into a human and died at the hands of his children. Over time, the blood gradually degenerated, and no cursed children were born until Christopher was born, in whom the final flare of the curse was embodied, turning into a wolf every full moon. If he doesn't seal himself like the first emperor, he too will become an ordinary wolf. For Christopher, this is a bolt from the blue, which is why he made a fuss and pounced when he saw her. The probability is quite high, but before he saw her only as a piece of fresh meat, lately he also often looks at her with a hungry look. But this is better than rice in the first days here. In order for the principal to quickly turn into a person, and that wizard is needed, and to whom she told how the search is progressing, Leonardo asked, but this takes a little more time. He asked her to hurry because there wasn't much time left. Oliver sat with his hands folded in front of him, his face displeased. Marta stood to the side and understood everything that was happening. Isabella sighed heavily. She understood that she needed to wait a little, and she herself would come soon. In a week at the latest, then Hannah Manu will appear. That day, Leonard returned to Jito. Before leaving, he asked to take care of the prince and expressed his desire to see him at the coming-of-age ceremony. It was a soft speech, unlike the first day when he spoke harshly and coldly. As soon as the surveillance disappeared, Oliver locked himself in his room with a bottle of wine, and Martha, who remained in the duchy, did not come out and was engaged in research, so that she was also not seen. As Christopher became calmer, the servants also got used to him. Although the surroundings had changed, overall it was a peaceful, everyday life. She wished other days could be like this. Servants passing by the room heard various screams. Isabella asked him to stop doing such things. No matter how hungry he was, he didn't need to bite her hands like that. She began to control his diet, worrying about the prince's health, and for this he began to bite her hands. She threw him a bone and said, "Bite it." Christopher began to tear at the blanket with her long, sharp claws. Then he demonstratively walked up and knocked the vase off the table with his tail. He took the curtain in his teeth and pulled it towards himself. He was clearly angry with Isabella. Isabella looked at all this. Her face darkened. She was simply angry. She looked at him with her furious gaze and said, "Enough." Then she clenched her hand into a fist and hit Christopher on the head. It was as if he had learned somewhere to be so angry, as if he really wanted to make her angry. He was outraged that she was scolding the crown prince of the empire. Since he is a prince, he must behave accordingly. But she herself must treat him like a prince. Christopher said. The effect of the blood ended. It didn't last long. Instead of words, there was only barking. Folding her hands in front of her chest, she said that she would not give him her blood because of his disgusting behavior. Isabella decided to punish him. She will not give him her blood until tomorrow, so that he realizes what he is doing. Christopher became so angry that he tried to attack her and knock her down. Then she caught him and threw him over her shoulder. He clearly didn't expect that. Turning her head, her gaze fell on the bed, and she thought that she needed to throw it there. But because of the anger and rage that was inside her, she accidentally threw him against the wall. She even felt a little scared and awkward about this situation. Christopher's gaze was very stern, and he began to bark. She asked him to calm down and speak with words. And so began their game of tag, where her life was in danger in the person of Christopher. They came to the winter garden. Isabella looked towards Christopher with a frightened face. He was getting closer and closer to her. If the main characters were in her place, this would be a romantic scene. But here she is, and this is the time of a bloody battle for her life. Christopher held her with his paw, and she only pushed him away, saying that she would not give him her blood today. Isabella swung her fist and threw him away from herself a little to the side. Christopher bowed his head to her, probably very upset after the situation that happened in the room. He continued to sit in front of her in the same position, only barked quietly and continued to look at the floor. If it's not possible, then it's not possible. He needs to work on his behavior and habits, Isabella told him. Christopher howled all day from injustice, but she still did not give him blood. And in the morning, he still did not speak. Today, she will give him blood if he behaves well. She held out her hand in which lay the ball. Then she swung and threw it to the side, telling Christopher to catch it, and he immediately ran after it. Isabella sat under a tree and was already starting to worry, because he had been gone for a very long time. Thoughts flashed through her head that something had happened. But then Christopher flies out of the bushes, holding some kind of animal in his teeth. He calmly walked closer to Isabella. Christopher brought something other than a ball, and she tried to take a closer look. He continued to hold it in his teeth for some time. He lowered his head closer to the ground, opened his mouth slightly, and carefully released it. It was a snow-white rabbit. She assumed that by doing this, he was hinting at a truce. Isabella folded her hands in front of her face and wondered where he had learned to do that. She extended her hand to him, telling him not to do it again, and then Christopher drank her blood. It took a little while for the blood to start working, after which Christopher said that he was wrong and would not do it again. In turn, Isabella apologized to him for treating him like a dog, and she would release the rabbit back into the mountains. He simply caught it alive. She smiled, wondering where he learned to be so nice. But if Christopher himself knew the answer to this question, if it is the same with his beloved later, they will be happy. I understand that Christopher was under a lot of stress. She made him promise that instead of overeating, he would exercise more. But that didn't mean they had to get up at dawn. In the morning, he must do a double jump. If he continues to overeat, he will truly become a pig. You just have to look at those fat buns. What should they do with them? They decided that they would run together tomorrow. A strange sound was heard from the kitchen. Most likely someone had broken in, and perhaps they were thieves. There was no suitable weapon nearby for defense. Nothing else to do. If anything, she would just have to tell Christopher to bite him. Isabella opened the door abruptly. They saw a maid who was stuffing herself with as much bread as she could because she was hungry. The maid fell to her knees, cried, and asked for forgiveness and mercy. She has a sick brother. She is the only one paying for all the expenses, and she took her dinner to him. That's why she had to skip meals and steal their food. Isabella remembered this girl. It was she who spilled the tea, and now she's stealing food. I must say that she really distinguished herself. But it's still unpleasant to see a skinny girl on her knees, praying for simplifications. At the time when her dog, Christopher, was so fat. She asked her name. She answered, Lydia. Apparently she has been starving all this time. Today is the first time that she looks hungry. Isabella prepared the soup and poured it into bowls. She put one plate on the floor and the other on the table and told them to eat. The maid didn't understand everything correctly. She burst into tears and asked not to eat her. She understands that she is guilty. She has sinned against her twice and is very afraid that she will be fed to Christopher. There are too many rumors going around. Lately, the servants had been feeding Christopher without her knowledge, so she thought everything was okay. But they still thought he was a cannibal. Her Chris eats only the best quality meat. He doesn't need someone like her, so let him eat it. While the maid was eating and admiring the delicious food, Isabella asked what her brother was sick with. Her doctor said it was an incurable disease with unknown causes. Lydia's parents died, leaving only the two of them. It was all very familiar to Isabella. She asked her to eat and clean up and wished her good night. For some time, she couldn't even sleep after this situation. She just looked at the ceiling. Her face was sad. Christopher could tell right away that she was worried about that maid. He thought it was very sweet because she was very caring, but she didn't think so. That's why he found it cute. The only thing that worried her was whether she had been kind to her, because Lydia was lying on the cold floor and was afraid to utter even one word. She has black hair and black eyes. Oddly enough, even her previous home environment was similar. For no particular reason, Isabella would just worry about her. She didn't get enough sleep and kept rubbing her eyes. She was so thinking about that maid that she couldn't fall asleep. She asked Grace if she knew Lydia. Her brother was sick. She replied that it had been about a year. The butler took pity on Lydia and sent a doctor, but in the end, the cause was not found. The doctor sent by the butler had to be a competent person, and without knowing the cause, it is impossible to cure the disease. Grace noticed that her mistress was worried about Lydia. She was so thin, skin and bones, and she was not her age. She is only 17 years old, but Isabella thought she was 15, and she is only a year younger. This is even more disturbing, but you can't worry so much about the fate of your subordinates, because you have enough of your own affairs. She turned to Marta for help. She wants to see a patient with an incurable disease of unknown origin. They agreed to meet after lunch. Christopher and Isabella exchanged glances. She told him not to say anything. He just asked if she would take him with her. He is worried that something might happen while she is gone, and she must protect him because he is weak. She was surprised that he considered himself weak, although he chased her around the house, and she barely fought back. Then, before leaving, he would walk twice as often, news that did not particularly please him. He turned around and said he was tired and walked away. She smiled, because she knew it would happen. Then she threw him over her shoulder and said that this couldn't be done, because he had promised. Lydia walked up to the room and knocked. She asked what happened. She has a sick brother at home. She wants to see if he can be cured. Then she introduced Marta, this girl, a great sorceress. They greeted each other and set off on their way. You shouldn't have gotten into the carriage right after eating. Now you feel sick. This house seemed very familiar to her. The maid felt disgusted to come here, but for her it was a normal house. She asked where her brother was. He was in a room on the second floor. There was a guy lying on the bed. It looked like a skeleton. Lydia said his name was Eugene. This name was very familiar to her, she began to remember. Eugene Mell was Lydia's brother. In the original, he becomes Hannah's apprentice, and it is he who will bring her to the duchy. Just at that moment, they are supposed to meet Christopher. And this house is familiar to her, because it is the very first place Hannah will come to. Hannah's meeting with Eugene in the original. Eugene was on the verge of death, and Hannah took him under the orders of the Tower Master of the Mages, and then cured him. However, thoughts about how he would wait for her in such a state did not give him any peace. He may die any day now or tomorrow. Martha realized what had caused Eugene's illness. It's called mnemia, a disease caused by blockage of the blood duct. Due to the non-circulating mana, he vomits blood, a common illness for beginner wizards, and in severe cases, death is possible. To cure it, do you need to prick it into an acupuncture point? It's amazing that it lasted a whole year. Usually even 3 months are difficult to last. Video of how big the mana volume is increases it even more. Martha noticed that something was wrong with Isabella. If Eugene is cured now, Hannah will not enter the duchy. Eugene is no longer in danger of dying. Even if left as is, he will not die. But for Christopher to return to a human body, Hannah is absolutely necessary. Grace asked if they succeeded. Apparently, this is such a serious illness. It is too late to treat my brother. Tears flowed from her eyes like a stream. It was hard for Isabella to see her tears. She walked up to Christopher. He had been watching her from the very beginning. I watched, believed, and relied on her help. She squatted down, bowed her head before him, and addressed Christopher, Your Highness. Isabella asked him not to worry, because she would do everything possible. Putting her hand on her heart, she said that she would definitely free him from the curse. Her hand reached out to his face, gently and caringly. Then she moved closer, tilted his head slightly, and kissed his forehead. This confused Christopher a little. He even felt at a loss. If she says so, he will have to believe her. If he does not manage to find Hannah, Christopher will be in big trouble. But Isabella knew she might regret her decision. She stood up and asked Martha to cure Eugene. She understood that she had turned the whole plot upside down with her own hands. She would have to bear responsibility for this. Martha looked at her and replied, "Yes, lady." Grace began to thank her, tears of joy forming in her eyes. Isabella didn't know that Eugene was Lydia's brother. In order to keep the fact of his recovery a secret, she asked Lydia to come up with a true story. Now they will have to throw all their efforts into finding Khan themselves. Thanks to this guy, she was able to summon a sorceress to them. Christopher asked if this would help in any way with his curse. She said no, but she vowed to break the curse. Now he already regrets it. He didn't know that this guy, their maid's brother. She only found out his name today and can't stop thinking about him. The Duchess's choice was wise, but she said she would definitely lift the curse. And he believes these words. She was touched by these words. Even if the sorceress ends up in hell, she will get her out of there. Or she will catch her at the entrance to hell. Isabella asked him to trust her and hugged him. She is a good fisherman and will definitely cope. Night, she fell into a deep sleep. Christopher went out and walked around the castle. He doesn't even know why the Duchess is so devoted to him. Maybe she thinks of him as her puppy. But at the moment, he feels most secure here. Because he is Chris. And she strokes his fur and kisses him. He remembered that situation in the house when she sat down and kissed him on the forehead. Christopher blushed and was a little angry, remembering that kiss, as if from a 3-year-old child. What a shame. He feels interesting and comfortable with the Duchess. A kind smile and a friendly hand, warm words, all the tenderness that she gives. He has never had anything like this before. They can't get any closer. If he becomes dependent on her, there will be no turning back. The maid saw Chris and ran towards him. She asked if Milady was asleep, whether he was surprised that she was out of breath, even from such a short run. If Isabella had been there, she would have picked him up and carried him back. Lydia asked why he was walking alone at such a time. And then she asked him what he liked more, meat, fish, or maybe fruit. But she knows exactly what he likes, my lady. He turned around and said he wasn't eating Isabella. Grace covered her mouth with her hand when she realized she was saying too much. And at that moment, Christopher definitely realized his mistake. He finally let it slip to Lydia, although no one should know. She looked at him thoughtfully. Then she added smilingly, "Of course, he's just so interested in her." He asked how she knew he could talk. Lydia quieted down a little and said, to tell the truth. Last night, she heard them talking before the lady got into the carriage. He was worried about Milady's health. His anxiety was noticeable in his tense gaze. Christopher asked if she knew who he was. His voice calm, but his eyes filled with worry. She answered with a question. The great spirit of the wolf. This answer suited him, because the less he knows, the more soundly he sleeps. It was his fault, because he had become too relaxed in his peaceful life, and he mentally reproached himself for his carelessness, which could have cost him dearly. She wanted to ask him something else. Her gaze became curious, almost playful. What does Milady like most? He answered confidently that he was, a proud grin appearing on his face, as if he had no doubt in his words. And then I realized what a stupid thing I had just said. He knows that Isabella values him very much, and he is unlikely to be wrong about that. She decided to ask about a treat for her. He thought about apple pie. She is omnivorous, but the other day I ate apple pie with such appetite. Then he realized that he couldn't tell her about such cuteness, because he was a serious wolf. Gwar thanked him for sharing, and then decided to leave him and move on. He thought that such a fool could not possibly be a spy for the Empress. Instead of brains, her head was filled with flowers. Christopher realized that it was time to go back, because it was already time to wake up. As he walked, he noticed that the interior of the mansion was cluttered. After all, murderers might appear again. When he started to approach the stairs, he saw some man. The guy looked at him in fear and called out to his lady. He met her with his mouth open. Isabella ran towards him. It irritated him that she was in her nightgown again. Who could run around in front of everyone in just her underwear, he thought. Isabella grabbed him, threw him over her shoulder, and went into the room. The maid watched them go with her mouth open. The other services also came closer. Christopher began to scold her for wearing a nightgown, which irritated him because there were a lot of men outside. But she asked him a counter question about where he had gone since the morning. She was scared because of his sudden disappearance. I searched every corner of the house, thinking that something might have happened. He even felt a little ashamed. He again thought that he would keep his distance, but carried away by the boundless love that Isabella pours out, he again lost his mind. She called him, Your Highness, and then she asked why he was silent. It's like he's gone crazy. She's younger than him. She's not even 18 yet. Apparently, he was thinking about losing weight, so he went out before sunrise. Later, it will be necessary to go straight to the table. She pulled his side to show. Then she started tickling him with the words, fat, fat. He didn't really like it. She's always been like that. A mischievous girl who loves to tease people. It feels like he doesn't even see a person in him, and that he can only think about something. She noticed that Christopher was a little upset and said that she was joking. Their wolf prince was the most handsome, but he added that as a person, he was much more handsome. Isabella said, Of course, since the wolf is beautiful, then as a person he must be even more charming. He corrected her. Not more charming, but more beautiful. Christopher noticed that she seemed to be calming the pouting dog. He asked when he turned into a human, would she continue to call him handsome or good? This question surprised her. Isabella nodded and said that when he returned to his human form, their relationship would not change. He was satisfied with this answer. Someday, they will not become neither the mistress nor the wolf, and someone much closer someday. He lay down next to Isabella and placed his paw on her hand. It's her fault, Karma. How can she hide so well? Hannah's whereabouts are still unknown, and she thought that if she heard rumors about Eugene, she would definitely show up. The problem is that she has already completely changed the events of the original. She noticed Christopher walking towards her. He came over and laid his head on her feet, and then he looked at her very softly, as if he wanted to ask for attention. It all looked so cute to her that she couldn't help but mutter with a smile. It was expected, but not easy to accept. Isabella also asked him not to worry, because sooner or later, Hannah would definitely be caught. She was amazingly good at fishing, Christopher added with a slight grin, as if that explained everything. Isabella raised an eyebrow, her voice slightly skeptical. She had caught something, but she caught him. Isabella thought she misheard. She didn't expect such words from Christopher. She said it was a bit of a joke. He interrupted her and said, honestly, she understood everything correctly. He suddenly became emotional, and she was about to catch Hannah. It seems that she has already lost interest in the fish she caught in her fishing grounds. But who said that he can come to the fishing grounds at will? She lets him go. Once she caught him, she had to take responsibility and behave nicely. Isabella asked him to go somewhere else besides her lands. But where could he go without her? The noise in the room irritated Oliver, and he told them to get out if they were going to coo. She asked if it was possible to meet a wolf, some kind of abnormal sexual desire. But he asked if her head was given to her for decoration. She was a complete fool. They are with His Highness at all. Christopher came closer to him, and then he said that he would allow him to stay all day in the royal wine cellar. Isabella thought for a moment that she had misheard. She blinked as if trying to shake off the surprise, and her voice wavered because she hadn't expected such words from Christopher. He banged the table and asked when his sister had become such a pervert. But she replied that he was handsome, treated her well, listened only to her, had become a little attached, and was quite alert at night. She liked all of this, and that money was needed to care for such a sweet creature. But she didn't need anything from him. She had plenty of her own money. Christopher and Oliver didn't know what to answer. And he is of noble blood, that should be enough. Then Christopher asked what if he had more money, much more than she did. Money goes to money. Now they will hold hands and go to the ceremony. Money to money, you say? Said Oliver. Then he will take a gun and destroy everything around. He also added that she shouldn't even think about walking down the aisle arm in arm. After these words, Christopher pushed him so hard that his arm hurt. Isabella asked His Highness when he had become such a pervert. She is a healthy and strong person, capable of standing up for herself, even if he cannot come to her aid and she does not need protection, Isabella thought. Isabella will definitely break the curse. Although Hannah is also healthy, she is not as strong as Christopher wants. She asked about appearance or character, to which she replied, a sensitive person with red hair and emerald eyes. Oliver was shocked that someone could be so frank. She was very surprised and said, "Really? Does he really look at her brother Leonardo like that? He is strong, healthy, red-haired, and has emerald eyes. She really doesn't know if he's sensitive, but it's definitely about her brother." Then Christopher said that, at the moment, he just wants to kill her. Oliver began to laugh loudly, adding that it was probably out of desperation. It was simply impossible. Isabella didn't understand what was wrong with him, and the tea party quickly ended. Oliver ended up getting bitten by Christopher for teasing him. After this, Christopher, sulking, went to his room. Marta came up and asked about her concern about that sorceress. If there were any traces, they could track her. Eugene entered the room and greeted everyone. She was glad he was better. When they first met, he was skin and bones. His condition quickly improved, and this could not but please. His complexion became healthier, his eyes sparkled, and his movements regained their former ease. It's all thanks to Isabella. He will definitely thank her for her kindness. He is even ready to give his life, but there is no need for it. Eugene handed her a cup of tea, from which a light steam of aromatic tea rose. At some point she grabbed his hand. On his wrist was a bracelet made of thread, decorated with a lily. She wondered where he got it from. He got it in the village. Someone said it would be very good for health. She immediately realized that it was Hannah. She had arrived in the duchy. Isabella asked when he got the bracelet. She asked, trying to remain calm, to which he replied, 2 days ago, not even suspecting the storm of emotions his words caused. Martha asked Eugene to lend her the bracelet for a while. If it helps, then of course it would be good if she stayed in the duchy, but just following the trail would be enough. Martha says she can be tracked. She needs to tell Christopher about this soon. He will be happy. Isabella ran headlong, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. It seemed that even the air around her was ringing with her impatience. Joyfully, she opened the doors of the room with one sharp movement, almost tearing them off their hinges, her eyes shining with anticipation and hope. But the room greeted her with deathly silence. It was empty. Christopher was not there. Only the fluttering curtains by the open window and a light breeze. Isabella couldn't believe her eyes and just stood there in shock. "Damn mongrel," she blurted out through her teeth, her voice shaking with rage and frustration. "He won't listen at all." When she went outside, she started screaming his name. Suddenly, a step was heard from behind, followed by a low male voice calling out to her. Isabella turned around sharply. He asked how she was doing. It was Alan. He had blossomed completely during the time they had not seen each other. She was ready to scream in fear when she saw him. Isabella asked if he had seen Christopher. He said he had seen him walking towards the back entrance with the maid recently. These words upset her. It seems he became friends with this maid. She remembers how the maid treated Christopher to various tasty treats. He asked her what she would do if she had to continue to communicate with him as a dog, to which Lydia replied that she would be glad to be my lady's dog. He said that he shouldn't have asked. Isabella was outraged that they were together and even communicating. She walked quickly towards them, with a very displeased face. Isabella asked what happened. Was it consensual or was it forced? She will never tell anyone. She can keep it a secret until she dies. Christopher said to just forget it, because this fool doesn't know anything anyway. Isabella thought he was still angry with her, because he kept looking away. She thanked Lita for the apple pie. She liked it very much. She was pleased to hear praise from her mistress. Lydia decided to leave them, so that they could talk among themselves. They watched her go. As soon as she left, Isabella asked what they had done to her, but Christopher was not going to answer. It was their secret, already secrets. He had grown up. Isabella had good news, and they were on Hannah's trail. But there is even better news. She handed him the bracelet that she took from Eugene. He looked at her and said that women are good. She didn't understand at all what he was talking about now. Perhaps this is about the situation when she asked about her brother. Apparently, she is still worried about it. She hugged him, stroked him, and said it was just a joke. That's probably why he left her and walked away. But Christopher knew that Isabella would follow him. She only went to see Martha. She needed to comfort him and go together. His Highness is behaving like a little child. He jumped up with the words, Isabella, and bit. But she repeatedly asked him not to bite his lips. Thus he scolded her nasty things. Blood started to flow down her lip, and then he asked if he could lick it. She leaned over and said that as soon as the bleeding stopped, he should move away immediately. It looked like a kiss again. If she kisses, she wants to do it with a handsome man. But he is only a man at heart. But on the outside, he is a dog. He asked if when he turned into a human, her blood would still be tasty for him. But she didn't know the answer to that question. He'd try it himself someday. He asked, without biting. She answered, "Yes, Your Majesty, you will do whatever you wish. Since you left the house, send her for a walk." Today they were going to go to the very top. He asked if she wanted to bet on who would get there first. She also clarified what they would be arguing about. Christopher said that the loser would fulfill the winner's wish. Isabella asked that these wishes not be too strange. She put her foot down and said, "Start," but that's against the rules. Isabella ran as fast as she could. To defeat the wolf Christopher, you simply have to be cunning. Here he suddenly overtook her, but she said that the game should be played humanely. Right on target, she can't. She needs to take a shortcut and catch up. She stopped to look around. But then I heard some strange rustling from behind me. It was a huge animal, similar to a wolf, but with the face of a bird. The stomach was determined, looking at Isabella with a fierce gaze. This mountain is used for regular walks, but apparently it's all because of its blood. She took out her sword and began to attack first. Her swing was decisive because she never doubted herself. She cut off the head, but it did not die. Only black liquid flowed onto the ground. She needs to win before it recovers. She raised her sword and said, "Either it or she will win, but no one is going to give up." After the subsequent blows, Isabella stood in a stance as if waiting for it to rise to its feet again. The animal continued to lie down. Its entire body was covered in scratches, and the black liquid was scattered all over the ground. Suddenly, she heard another rustling sound and turned her head. Christopher flew out of the bushes, calling her. She didn't expect to see His Highness so quickly. If he hadn't warned her, she might have swung at him. Christopher expected her to whine again, but she seemed to be coping well. She stood there in bewilderment, wondering how he knew. There was a strong smell of blood everywhere. He couldn't help but notice it. She had destroyed the very core. It wasn't easy to do that. Isabella did not know what a core was, and in her ignorance, she chopped it up. In fact, that's what happened, and she chopped it until it died. Christopher started laughing loudly. And she really is something. The first person to kill a chimera without even knowing about its core. If he had arms, he would have given her a standing ovation, and she thought it was a compliment. But for some reason, she felt awkward after his words. There are two options why the monster is here. The first is that the monster came here from the northern mountains, and the second option is the work of the Empress. This reminds Isabella a little vaguely of the original. An Empress, a sorceress who commands familiars, mostly birds, especially crows. Unable to communicate with large animals due to her limited abilities, she is obsessed with creating chimeras that would obey her commands. Chimera, the monster she killed. Because it's an artificially created monster, the probability of its appearance is much lower in the north. They need to go down and tell Oliver everything. Halfway up the mountain, he and Christopher decided to head back. It would have been nice if they had just returned to the mansion, but now it was His Highness's turn. It hadn't even been 5 minutes since she had killed the monster, and had already finished off several. She doesn't even know where their core is, so it takes a long time to destroy them. It's definitely the Empress's work. She released them. Christopher looked at her with sweet eyes and said that it was too much for him, but it wouldn't work on her now. He was upset that it didn't work. Then Christopher called Isabella mistress. This made her feel too disgusted. Then he continued to say that she can't kill them instead of Christopher, but Christopher is very scared. He wants a hug. It's funny that Gibble can catch everyone himself. He has nothing to worry about. She asked not to impersonate someone else. Christopher left her. There was only one snake left here, a fucking wolf bird. It sounded too rude, and he also stepped into black goo. When they came down, the first thing they did was report this fact to Oliver. And hearing the chimera, Oliver took the knights and climbed the mountain. Martha followed him to find the place where the monsters came from. Everyone has a lot to do. It's a pity that Isabella can't go outside again. Christopher asked what she was drawing. She showed him a drawing where she tried to depict him. But Christopher hoped it wasn't him. The animal show. The kindergarten. She shouldn't be lying, because he doesn't look so wrinkled. But she thinks she did a pretty good job of portraying Christopher. Someone knocked on the door of the room. She allowed them to enter. It was Eugene. He brought good news for Isabella. They managed to find the sorceress Hannah Manhwa. Isabella couldn't believe that after so long waiting to meet her, they were able to find her. She is no longer in the duchy, but fortunately still in the north, Eugene said. Tomorrow, as soon as it gets light, the teacher will take her. Now he will leave them. Christopher looked at him with a kind of angry expression. Isabella took his head in her hands and turned to him. Your Highness, tomorrow he will be able to return to his appearance. The morning will come, and he will return. Now this is truly the end of the day of life with Christopher. If he hadn't become a wolf, she would never have had the chance to communicate with the prince. Christopher looked at her with pitiful eyes. They've been waiting for this for so long and should be happy, but it's still a bit of a shame. Isabella became much more attached to him than she expected, which is why she did not want to take him under even temporary protection. Christopher noticed that Isabella had a very warm look in her eyes today. She said that because today is the last day, she remembers it so as not to forget anything. She said it as if he was going to die. Isabella knew he wouldn't die, but if he managed to imprint on Hannah, she wouldn't be able to see him anymore, so she needed to do it right. She took his muzzle, pulled it towards her, and gently kissed him on the nose. A kiss goodnight and a kiss goodbye, she said. She wished him good dreams. It's hard for her to sleep hugging Christopher. When she turned around in the morning, her hand touched Christopher. But in her sleep, she did not understand what kind of texture it was. The fur was gone. He will be glad if she stops touching him. Isabella opened her eyes to get a better look. She jumped up screaming, a huge shock on her face. Christopher took her hand and then said good morning. She noticed the silver hair and golden eyes. Then she realized that she was lying in the same bed with a naked prince. Isabella even doubted whether this was really her Christopher. When he stood up, she suddenly jumped back, because he was completely naked. Everyone could hear screams from the room. I asked her to calm down a little, but at the moment she cannot be calm. She asked why he suddenly became human, but he himself does not know. He opened his eyes. And he is human. Perhaps the poison with which the Empress poisoned him has been absorbed. But then it turns out that there is no need to look for Hannah anymore. They stood a meter apart. Christopher wanted to ask her a question. He was curious if she thought he was handsome. Only the lower part is covered, and he looks like a pervert. But of course, the main character is a little different. She answered him. Yes. She didn't understand where all of Christopher's fat had gone. He had covered himself up, because she was looking at him somehow slyly. But also, Isabella was feeling his chest. She asked him to wait a little. She needed to go get Oliver. And Isabella went downstairs. She couldn't believe how this could happen. The meeting she had imagined. The reunion. With respect for the now human Christopher, clothed of course. But as they say, dreams are worth a dime. Most likely, he imprinted on her, and not on Hannah, as it should have been. Imprinting occurs in 2 stages: psychological love and affection for a partner, physical attraction. They constitute a physical imprint at the moment of the union of these 2 conditions. But she didn't see any of them. Even after saying goodbye to him last night, she didn't feel loved. Christopher walked out of the room, holding a robe in his hand. He came up behind her and threw it on her, because you shouldn't walk around in your underwear. He shouldn't walk around only half covered. But who's talking? She sent him back to his room and ordered him not to leave it. The door slammed shut and he just froze in place. Christopher's appearance scared her. She urgently needs to wake up Oliver. She entered the room and was not surprised that he was still sleeping, although it was already 11 o'clock. She is also an owl, but he is much bigger. Isabella shouted his name. He jumped up and asked what happened. Then she answered that His Highness had become a man. He asked about the sorceress, whether she had arrived at the castle. But her answer was negative. He was just sleeping and just woke up as a man. Oliver wondered how it was possible, how he could wake up a man. Isabella got scared, opened her eyes, and there was his chest. Oliver reached for his sword. Isabella asked what he was going to do. He said that there was a naked man in her room, in her bed, and he couldn't react any other way. He had wild eyes, he repeated, bare chest, beast, His Highness. His Highness the Prince, the bloody bastard, he knew it. It was wrong for a bloody dog to share a bed with a human. She began to calm him down, because nothing had happened, and asked him to lower the sword. He said that she was not yet 18 years old. Isabella still managed to take the sword from his hands. She asked him to calm down and go get him his clothes. Isabella asks him to take care of the prince now. If a man leaves her room without clothes, Rumors are sure to spread. He asked her to wait in the room. She began to rush him. He flexed his fists and said he would go and say hello. There was one problem. If he couldn't hold back in front of the prince, Isabella hoped that it wouldn't come to a fight, because it wouldn't be easy to hold back his emotions, especially when it came to Oliver. Christopher sat on the couch waiting. His face was satisfied. He wasn't thinking about anything in particular. But I didn't expect to see her face like that. It was very cute. He will need to think and figure out how to keep her, because now it was imprinted. It was a fact, and there was no getting away from it. Last night, when I opened my eyes, I was surprised to see my human hands, the fact that he returned to his body, the imprinting with Isabella. All this means that the condition of imprinting and attachment was fulfilled. Although she loved the wolf Chris, the tender kiss that Isabella gave him at night was apparently the trigger. He walked up to the window and thought, I'll start from here. Their relationship, frankly speaking, is not straightforward, because he is still nothing more than a pet dog. Most likely, she was embarrassed by his sudden transformation into a human and ran away, afraid of being imprinted. He needs to approach her quietly and carefully so that she is already in his arms when she wakes up, so that she does not have any thoughts of escape. He heard the door open and turned around, saying, Come in, Isabella. But a big surprise awaited him. It was Oliver. They stood and just looked at each other. Christopher asked what he was doing there. Oliver suggested that he must have been expecting to see someone else. He turned to Oliver and said that he had to tell him straight. It was his innocence that had been stolen from him. Now, I wonder how Christopher's relationship with Hannah will develop. He became human before meeting her, but according to the rules of the novel, they must fall in love with each other. These are the main characters. Everything should work out. They called out to her, and she turned her head. It was Christopher. He was wearing a white shirt and black classic pants. It suited him very well. He asked her if she liked the style, but even if he was wearing a rug, he would still look cool. After all these words, Oliver cleared his throat so that they would not forget that he was here. He told everyone that His Highness the Prince had stopped in the Duchy of Carcel for a sanatorium treatment. This was strange, and they might suspect something, but their butler should take care of that. Isabella asked him not to stand, but to sit down next to her and pointed with her hand next to her. Apparently, she still thinks he's her little dog. But since she offered, he won't refuse. With a sharp movement, Oliver sat down right between them, grateful that they had left room for his brother. He asked them to be patient and call his older brother now. Oliver turned to the ball and asked to see Leonardo's face. He said, Your Highness, everything was a success. It's a huge relief. Christopher asked him in return how he was doing. Rumors of trouble with him have spread, not only in Jito, but also on the outskirts. The duchy is still quiet, but we must save him until his coming-of-age ceremony. They asked when to expect him, but he had too many pending matters. The man shouted for His Highness to return now, or he would resign. Isabella covered her ears from this scream. Christopher said that he would have to do it himself then, because he finds his stay here very interesting. On the day of the celebration of His Majesty's birthday, he would like to see the expression on the Empress's face when she saw this. It was a chimera. The Empress descended onto the mountain behind the duchy. At the very least, Isabella could have been hurt. Leonardo began to worry about his sister and asked how she was. Isabella moved closer and greeted him, saying that His Highness was joking and that she had defeated the chimera herself, and how could she have fallen for something like that? He understood them, asked them to contact him as soon as he arrived. He would come out to meet him, and also praised Oliver and Isabella. Oliver started shouting at him not to say that, and to take him away from here, but from the ball came only one word, telling them to continue in the same spirit. Oliver got out of bed. He was very unhappy. Isabella looked at Christopher and invited him to go out with her. He immediately agreed without thinking. While Oliver stood with the ball trying to reach Leonardo, they quickly disappeared from him. The whole castle could hear screams that there was a fucking dog in their house. Oliver had to tolerate Christopher in the mansion, and instead of eating, he began to drink a lot. If he was only going to drink, then what was the point of following her into the dining room? It pours straight down his throat, without any snacks. The snacks were on the table, right in front of him. Christopher was enjoying his food, and Oliver was glaring at him and holding the bottle in his hand, as if he expected him to choke. The principal asked Oliver not to be too offended by him, because they would soon become very close. Oliver asked me not to talk this bullshit anymore. He probably only says that because he just turned around recently. He must understand that just yesterday he was a dog. It would be better if he remained a dog. Christopher hasn't decided yet. He turned to Isabella as well, and then he looked at her as if flirting and asked if she thought he was handsome. To her, he was so damn handsome that she couldn't even describe it in words. Oliver was indignant. If the face was good, the rest should be good too, she asked, not to talk this nonsense, because the body should also be beautiful. Christopher suggested that he go to the wine cellar, but this time it wouldn't work. He will allow him to take as much wine as he wants. Oliver thought about it, because how could he refuse such an offer? Christopher then asked if their dialogue was over. Without waiting for an answer, he broke off a piece of the airy pie, and with unexpected tenderness reached out to Isabella, clearly intending to feed her from his hands. Isabella mechanically opened her mouth. But at that very moment, someone's hand flashed between them. Oliver intercepted the fork with a triumphant look, bringing the treat to his sister, and began to feed her himself, saying, "Your brother will treat you." She grabbed his face, her eyes flashing, then asked what he was doing. Isabella stood up and started yelling at him because he was really sick and grabbed her jaw so hard that it hurt. But he can't just watch them fall in love. Isabella considered these words complete nonsense. If he was drunk, then let him go to his room and sleep it off. What he was thinking would never happen, she added, rolling her eyes. Because she and the prince were just friends. She grabbed him by the scruff of the neck, but Oliver immediately began babbling, I'm sorry, I won't do it again." His tone was so pathetic that even Christopher involuntarily snorted. Isabella turned and suggested that His Highness go and leave Oliver here, since he had already gotten on everyone's nerves. She turned to him again, because he ignored her. He had a kind of angry and gloomy face. He asked where she was going. Isabella didn't expect such an answer to her question. Christopher stood up, his face unreadable. "Maybe just leave me here," he suggested coldly, irritation clearly evident in his voice. Isabella felt a sinking feeling inside her. Had she done something wrong? These thoughts immediately flashed through her mind, but she couldn't figure out what exactly she had done wrong. His gaze was so icy, she even thought that he could kill her on the spot. What was happening to him, she thought. At that moment, Martha entered the room. Seeing the prince, her eyes widened. She asked how Christopher became human again. This burst out of her, in complete bewilderment. But it just happened somehow. She didn't expect it to happen today. And why not a day earlier? If he was going to. And they forgot. It's a pity. But first she has to ask about the main character. Marta straightened up and said in a businesslike manner that Hannah was waiting for them in the living room. Isabella immediately jumped to her feet. They had to go. And now, she said sharply, glancing at Christopher, her tone leaving no room for objection. From the first meeting, everything went wrong. He couldn't imprint. I thought that if he got used to her face, then it would work out later. Hannah bowed and greeted everyone. She made a graceful curtsy, smiling from ear to ear, and introduced herself. "I am Hannah Manhwa. Very pleased to finally meet you in person." Looking at her in person, Isabella sees that she herself is as neat as her name. She said with a smile on her face that they needed her help. Pointing to Christopher, she said that this guy had been poisoned and was asking her to take a look. Everyone was shocked because he laid his head on her shoulder. Isabella was irritated that he was behaving like that in front of the guest. Hannah covered her mouth with her hand and said, "God." She asked for his hand. But what is she waiting for? Let him take it quickly. He asked Isabella to take it herself because he was scared. But she was not at all scary, although Christopher suddenly cringed, as if in front of him was not an elegant lady, but a real monster. What was happening to him today? She thought in despair. Martha said that Mr. Christopher was a coward. Despite his appearance, what could a man called the terror of the battlefield be afraid of? Finally, Anna managed to take his hand, but he did not let go of Isabella's hand either. When he was Chris, I could only feel his paws, which were covered in fur. Now he has such long arms, it's all somehow amazing. She looked at his face, white and silver hair, and beautiful yellow eyes. Isabella asked him if it hurt or not, because his eyes were red. He said it was because of her. The examination was over. Christopher abruptly removed his hand. "There's nothing to worry about," Hannah said. "No signs of poisoning, completely healthy." They can't relax until they get a diagnosis, although she's glad he doesn't have any problems. But then Hannah continued to speak. The reason why he was healthy. Her voice sounded mysterious, as if she was revealing some mysterious secret. There is a monster in him, no. More precisely, he is a demon. Hannah straightened up. Her eyes lit up with professional interest. She added, or rather, demonic blood flows in his veins. They sat and listened attentively. A tense silence reigned in the room, holding their breath, listening to her every word. Even the air seemed thick with unspoken questions. Christopher asked if she could see that, but she could see much more. He tilted his head to the side, his voice filled with genuine interest. Then he asked even more. Hannah sees the connection between them, as well as the fact that she is unstable. Isabella sat there, her gaze full of bewilderment, moving from Hannah to Christopher and back again. She didn't understand what connection she was talking about. Fragments of thoughts were spinning in her head, but none of them formed a logical picture. Martha looked at her and then asked what she was talking about, but she had no answer to that question. Christopher walked up to Hannah and grabbed her chin. She seemed to have talent and a keen eye. Christopher chuckled coldly, his fingers lightly squeezing Hannah's chin. But you know, words like that usually don't live long, he whispered so quietly that only the two of them heard. A dangerous spark flashed in his eyes. Isabella didn't understand how this could happen to the main character. Shouldn't the two of them fall in love? She thought. If he had known how presumptuous she was, he would have kept quiet, she apologized. Christopher unclenched his fingers and leaned back casually on the sofa, folding his hands in front of him, his posture radiating some kind of restlessness. But the tension in the air still hung like the silence before a storm. Then he turned to Martha, and she immediately understood everything. Pretending to be busy, we really do have to go, she announced too loudly, trying to diffuse the situation. She put her hand on Hannah's shoulder, hinting that it was time for them to say goodbye. The sorceress silently stood up and left. Isabella watched her go. Isabella asked what was going on with Christopher, to which he replied that she was being too arrogant. They couldn't even get close, let alone imprint. She hoped that Christopher would at least perceive her as someone who helped him. She didn't think that she would be cursed by an arrogant person. Isabella stood up and was about to leave. Then he took her hand and asked where she was going. She replied that she needed to say goodbye to Hannah properly. Christopher looked at her like a child. Thanks for the clarification. That's what was expected to be said from him, she called her. So she definitely needs to say goodbye properly. Turning and looking at Christopher, she said she would be back soon. Isabella managed to catch up with Hannah. The sorceress, in turn, bowed and apologized for not being able to help. But in reality, it was not she who should apologize. Isabella herself apologized for the fact that they invited her and treated her badly. Hannah said she was very kind, but Christopher was very kind too. It's just that he was probably not in a good mood today, and she hoped that her mood wouldn't be spoiled too much. Because of this, his displeasure was understandable, because she was so self-confident. Don't worry, it's okay, Hannah said softly, and Isabella felt a weight lifted from her soul. She was actually glad to hear that. Maybe it wasn't that bad, she thought. She held out her hands to her with a smile on her face. Isabella extended hers back without thinking. Something in the gesture felt right, like it was meant to be. They stood and held hands. At some point, some magic started to happen. Hannah noticed that Isabella was no less special than he was. Her blood attracted demons. As it turns out, they are very similar in this regard. Then, Isabella jerked as if burned and pulled back sharply, breaking contact, her hands shaking and her heart pounding in her chest. But she just smiled at her. In the original, this must have been the reason Christopher attacked Hannah. The pheromones were most likely in the alluring scent of blood, Hannah explained quietly, watching Isabella turn pale. I don't know what your life was like before, Hannah said, and she looked down. But Hannah's life was not the smoothest. She just said that she better stay away from him, finally exhaling as if squeezing out a warning. For now, her blood is just medicine for him, Hannah continued, choosing her words carefully. She paused, as if hesitating whether to speak. But she still added that one day her blood would become poison for him. And when it happens, Hannah looked Isabella straight in the eyes. You will feel the consequences in full. Saying this in her voice, there was no threat, but a bitter truth, suffered through her own experience. One day they will become poison to each other, so they must keep their distance. She thought that her blood was a tonic or a medicine for him, but not a poison. Because of her blood, Christopher would have problems. But I just want to understand how big the problems are. Hannah warned her with such concern on her face. Could he really die, she thought. If so, they will have to move away. Christopher must break the curse and become the perfect emperor. And Isabella, in turn, must continue to live safely in this world. Christopher walked into the room in fear. Apparently the girl said something bad, but she still didn't want to part with him. He would have to return to Jito anyway, and they were destined to part. It was all too heartbreaking. He doesn't know what she heard, but it was probably nonsense. He asked her not to pay attention to it. But she can't ignore the main character's experience with superpowers. Isabella moved closer to him and said, "Your Highness, let's talk." He was even a little scared. Then Isabella thought that her face was too ugly. She got angry and clutched the sheet in her hand. Christopher immediately understood everything and asked her to stop. He should have answered, no. Then the pillow flew straight at him with such force that he even fell onto the bed. Isabella was scared. She felt like she had hit him too hard. Christopher was in pain. It seemed like he had dislocated his shoulder. Isabella began to apologize to him. He smiled and said that he was in terrible pain. And then he added that if someone blows, everything will pass very quickly. She put her hand on his shoulder and thought it was her fault. She had to take responsibility. Christopher asked what she was doing, but she was just trying to set the bone. At that moment, Christopher grabbed her and turned her over. He pushed her onto the bed and hovered over her, leaving Isabella speechless. Everything Christopher said is okay now. As it turned out, everything went away for him. Apparently, it was a groan of relief. Now he was going to have a serious talk with her. Christopher asked what happened. Then Isabella started to tell. Hannah said that her blood could become poison, and that he could suffer because of her. She asked what it meant, but she didn't say anything else. Christopher didn't like Hannah from the start, and she didn't even give a reason. There's a chance she's wrong. He would be able to understand the meaning if he were a wolf now. Isabella's blood definitely invigorates him. Now he's a man and not a cannibal. He can't hunt her. But they still better be careful. She just called her blood poison. But here's what they'll do next if that turns out to be true. Christopher doesn't know about Isabella, but he doesn't care. If her blood becomes poisonous, then they will neutralize her. Just as when he gets out of control, she scolds him. He reminded her how angry Oliver was every day when he was Chris. She took care of him many more times. He grabbed her face with his hands and asked her to look at him. Isabella pulled back and asked him to let go. He could just say that. Why was he grabbing her cheeks? She thought. If he screws up again, he'll just ask her to scold him with that beautiful hand. She asked if she could really treat the prince like that. Anyway, she was the only one who could stop him. Isabella clearly remembers trying to calm down the enraged Christopher, but it would be a shame if he got into trouble because of her. In fact, Isabella was also worried about it. He stroked her head, saying how honest she was. And he clearly doesn't want to distance himself from him because of some woman's words, just like she doesn't. But it would be right to do just that, for each other's sake. But then Christopher asked what if he could guarantee her safety. He also asked that if he could find the right way to protect her, then it would be good for her, she replied. If he could guarantee her life would be preserved. He said, okay, he's not going to break up with her. Let him throw these thoughts out of his head. She didn't forget that he was choosing a very difficult path. They could solve everything much more simply, just move away from each other. That's what she wants. Well, it's not that hard for them. If it becomes dangerous because of their blood, then they will simply avoid bleeding. Isabella scratched her head and said, simply put, it is possible. Then Christopher folded his hands in front of him and said, it's decided, this conversation is over. He extended his hand to her and said that they had not walked for a long time and offered to fix it. Isabella only said one phrase, I hate you. Nevertheless, she stood up and accepted his invitation. Isabella was delighted with the winter garden, especially the variety of flowers that grew there. Christopher called out softly to Rosetta, at the same time taking a neatly folded linen handkerchief from his pocket. Before he could utter a word, the girl had already dropped to the damp ground, completely ignoring the possible stains on her dress. A slight smile appeared on his lips as he held out the handkerchief. He wanted to spread it out for her. There was a slight annoyance in his voice, mixed with concern. Isabella raised her eyebrows slightly, studying his face in surprise. When did he manage to become so gallant? Flashed through her mind. But nevertheless, she accepted the handkerchief from his hands. With unexpected tenderness, she spread the cloth on the grass, deliberately making room next to her so that he could sit down. Isabella smiled and pointed to the handkerchief, then asked him to sit next to her. Christopher sat down next to him and covered his face with his hands. Apparently, he was very ashamed of this situation. Isabella began to weave plants together, but since she hadn't weaved for a long time, she forgot how to do it correctly. He looked at her in surprise and then asked what she was doing, to which she replied, "You'll see, you'll find out." With deft movements, she wove a wreath and, without giving him time to come to his senses, placed the creation on his head. The wreath was finished, Isabella announced, leaning back to admire her work, her eyes shining with the genuine joy of the simple moment. Christopher said he already had a crown, but it couldn't be compared to a crown. Then he got up and walked in the other direction. Isabella took on a new product. His voice made her look up. He was holding something in his hands, carefully hidden in his fist. He doesn't know how to weave wreaths, so he asks to accept this in exchange. She really liked the ring he made with his own hands. She didn't even know he could do that. She really liked the gift. She thanked him, and he asked her to make him some more. But Isabella liked this one too. She didn't understand why it needed to be changed, to which Christopher said that it had already fallen apart. Isabella was tormented by one question. Could he smell her? But there was some catch in this question. He looked at her questioningly. He used to smell something delicious when he was Chris, but she smelled normal, and now she smelled like flowers. She doesn't know what she smells like, but it must smell good. Isabella doesn't want to worry about being eaten. She asked what Hannah smelled like. He opened his mouth and asked in complete shock why she needed her smell. It felt like she was a pervert. Isabella knew that Hannah was the main character. There had to be something memorable about her. She decided to let the situation slide, since everyone would find out at the prince's birthday banquet. Christopher asked for her hand and told her that she had nothing to sigh about. Isabella had a question she really wanted to ask, the question of how many girls he had. It was clear from his expression that the question was very confusing. She noticed that he was getting close to her too easily. Christopher decided to ask her the same question, but Isabella had a very high bar. No one had ever been liked. He decided to move a little closer and asked what about him. She laughed and said that he was perfect, and thanks to him, her standards were raised, because he was the most handsome in the world. With a smile on his face, he said that in that case, she probably wouldn't have anyone in the future. Isabella Carcel is in trouble. She can neither get married nor fall in love. As it turned out, she could live alone, which surprised Christopher greatly. She doesn't want to marry a man who is experienced in relationships, so she will take a puppy and live alone. Then Christopher indignantly shouted that he was there. Well, what kind of relationship can there be if they are just friends? With the words, "not friends," Christopher turned away from her. She didn't expect such an answer. He continued to sit there, offended. Now the question was in her head. If they are not friends, then who are they? Perhaps they were colleagues who had overcome adversity together, she suggested. Then I voiced my opinion to him, to which she replied that there was no need to decide for him. They have a deeper relationship than what she says. And it seemed that he was talking about the relationship between a dog and its owner. It seemed to Christopher that she still saw him only as a pet. Then she stood up and said that she recognized him as a real person. Christopher stood up and said he was going to leave to find another owner. Isabella asked not to do this, because they had not yet prepared. Before she could finish speaking, Christopher clamped his lips over hers, making it too difficult to say anything further. Apparently, he was very angry with her. He even told her outright not to talk to him anymore. Isabella was alone again today. She has a desire to be alone, judging by her mood. She was rejected by Christopher again. He doesn't even want to see her. She hasn't done anything, so she doesn't know why he is so cold towards her. But she also understands that they don't have much time left together. Oliver, on the contrary, was glad about this. Let them remain apart until Gito left, he said. They won't be able to see each other when he goes back there, Isabella said, her eyes full of sadness. Then Oliver said that they would go together, but she didn't understand why she was needed there at all. Oliver, wide-eyed, asked why she wasn't going, but Isabella just didn't see the point. They are going specifically to the coming-of-age ceremony, she forgot. After the banquet, in honor of the prince's birthday, there will be a coming-of-age ceremony. Isabella brought the cup closer to her and said that she would just stay home. After these words, Oliver screamed very loudly. Isabella even had to cover her ears with her hands. She asked him to speak a little quieter, because her eardrums would burst. Oliver grabbed her by the shoulders and started shaking her. He said that she absolutely had to go to the ceremony in Jedo, because she herself said that she would rather die than stay in the north. But she herself was going to live luxuriously in Jedo. She pulled her hand away, saying that she had already changed her mind. Oliver can't believe his ears, because she said she had changed. But was it really that much? She was immediately bombarded with questions about her health. Maybe she was sick, but she was fine. Isabella asked if he would live there until the ceremony. He nodded. He would stay home for a while longer, if that was the case. She wouldn't be so sad. They think that you need to go to Jido to get caught up in dirty political games. Exactly. Besides, the Empress will be there. She will not remain on the sidelines, Isabella decided to add. Especially after Isabella looked after His Highness and protected him. The Empress will consider her a henchman and will start to bite her vilely until she loses heart. Poets reason she will not go. In the original, the Empress was easily killed. Obviously, their meeting with her now does not promise her a long life. Oliver stood up, stroked her head, and said that she knew black and white well. But she was no longer a child. Even her eyes are clear and shining, Oliver added with a smile on his face. This infuriated Isabella, and she began to ruffle his hair, telling him not to treat her like that again. Then suddenly, Simon enters the room. In fact, he was standing behind the door and watching this picture for some time. They hadn't seen each other for quite a long time, so they greeted each other and began to discuss their affairs. The situation in the castle is not very good. Due to uninvited guests, Simon heard about this, as well as the fact that His Highness is staying. Since he came to get some treatment, there is no need to tell them that he is going somewhere. Simon's heart was touched to hear the young lady make such sensible remarks. The Baron had good news. They had finally signed a contract with Asila's workshop. Isabella watched with satisfaction the results of their joint work. Finally, everything worked out, she thought, feeling pleasantly tired after a busy day. She didn't do anything, and it's all his fault. Simon handed her some document and added that he didn't know what to do with such kind words from my lady. She looked at him intently. In that case, Isabella would go with them to Jedo, Simon said, and Asila agreed on the condition that she would personally manage the affairs. All this is because Isabella is the CEO, but she was just an extra and only indicated her name in the document. Here her menacing gaze looked at Oliver, so she asked what was going on here. Noticing how her brother was trying to hide something, she held the document and saw her signature on it. It was Isabella who mentioned Asil's workshop, so it is now her responsibility. Simon offered to provide his name to ensure the successful completion of the deal, because he doesn't do stupid things. Then she decided to change everything immediately, so that Simon would become the director. He doesn't want to take responsibility either, he said with a smile. He thinks that Isabella would definitely do a good job, but this job was simply thrust upon her. Here she remembered their conversation on the street, where she offered to give him a seal so that she would not be bothered unnecessarily. If she had known, she would never have given her seal. She won't let him go just like that. He won't leave just like that. He handed her another document. She looked at him with a face full of distrust. But Simon, to commemorate Asila's contract, they promised to make earrings and a necklace for her coming-of-age ceremony. She liked the jewelry. She understands that they cannot gain fame. Simon ran. He shouted that he would inform that they would go together. Oliver and Isabella exchanged glances. Apparently, she would have to go. She was very upset. Then her brother cheered her up a little. Isabella sighed heavily, her face sad. She began to complain to her maid Grace. She did not want to go to Jedo. She wanted to stay at home. But if she did it her way, she would feel sorry for the Baron, who had traveled and worked so hard to succeed in this deal. All this money could become her retirement fund. She doesn't want to give up. The earrings and necklace made of monostones will be well advertised, especially if she wears them to the coming-of-age ceremony. Grace tried to cheer her up by telling her that everything would be fine, and that maybe she really should go to Jedo. She understands that she needs to pull herself together. Even if she doesn't like it, she's not going to live there. She'll just take a look and go back home. Take full advantage of this ceremony. Grace was surprised by her changeable mood. Isabella asked where the prince was now, whether he was in his room, and received a positive answer to her question. She thought for a moment and remembered his words, where he told her not to even think about talking to him. It seemed he was really offended, she whispered. But if he had misunderstood, then she did not have to report to him. Let him sort out his own thoughts. She knocked on the door and asked if he was there. Isabella opened the door slightly and realized that he was definitely not in the room. When she walked in, she even held her breath at what she saw. The room was in a huge mess. It looked like a thief had broken into the duchy, and most importantly, he was no ordinary thief. Isabella immediately gave Grace the task. They had barely left his room when Martha ran towards them with all her might. Isabella looked at her questioningly. Martha, oblivious, began to rummage through the drawers feverishly, turning everything upside down, her fingers shaking and her breathing ragged. She wanted to ask her something, but she just ran past her. "Excuse me, my lady, I have to go," Marta said as she walked away, disappearing down the corridor, her voice filled with a strange mixture of fear and determination. She went outside, saw Marta, and asked what happened. As it turned out, the barrier was broken. His Highness sensed something was wrong, and in the meantime, someone stole a fragment of the chimera. Running out into the yard, Isabella noticed Marta at the gate. What happened? Her voice sounded sharp, forcing the maid to stop. Marta pointed to the side and said that it seemed like the trail led there. But there's nothing there except the waste incineration plant. Isabella thought he was planning to burn the evidence. She and Grace ran, Martha shouting after them to wait for her. They were determined. The maid took out the knives. The boy sat on his knee and looked at the burning flames. His clothes were similar to those worn by the servants of their family. He had some kind of gold bag in his hands. Isabella screamed at the top of her lungs for Grace to stop him. Then, she launched the first dagger in his direction. It flew straight into his hand. Black blood flowed, and the bag fell to the ground. They approached him and asked what he was doing there. The boy stared at Isabella. Of the servants, only Grace, the butler, and Hannah could look directly at her. Most likely this guy was not one of the Carcel servants. He didn't look like a human at all. There is some kind of loophole in their house. For some reason, someone always appears. The dirt bowed and said that she would look for it and close it. But she can't just close it, because it's a creature, a monster. And this monster was so high level that it was able to break through her barrier. Marta divided the space so as not to damage the buildings. In any case, monsters rarely look like people. Marta also suggested capturing him alive and doing some research, but Grace shouted that they just needed to get rid of him. Then the boy looked at them all. His face was calm and very pale. With a hissing and squelching sound, 3 snakes crawled out of his mouth, their scales shimmering poisonous white. And then 3 snakes crawled out. They started talking to each other. They were caught, so they can eat. Someone allowed them to eat if they were caught. Isabella smiled and asked who told them this. One of the snakes smiled back at her and replied, "That woman." Grace and Martha did not understand what woman they were talking about. Then Isabella thought that perhaps they were talking about the Empress. It was hardly possible to talk about that. "There are 3 women here. Each one will get one," said one of the snakes. They glanced at Isabella and said that this woman seemed the most delicious. Grace covered Isabella with her hand and asked her to move away. She is Martha, the elite sorceress who always controls the battlefield, and Grace, a natural-born elite assassin. She doesn't need to interfere. The girls stood next to each other, and the snakes headed straight towards them. "And it doesn't hurt at all," said one of the snakes. Marta stood in shock that practically nothing happened to the snake. It seems that the Empress prepared the monster especially for Martha. Grace stood in front of them and said that she would try to deal with them herself. She seemed to fly up to them and cut all 3 necks with her dagger. Black blood poured out of the body, and the head flew off to the side. They didn't care at all about such actions, so they decided to try to attack again. Dirt wiped her face with her hand and realized that they wanted to do this kind of thing endlessly. Isabella stood watching and wondering where their weak spot might be. One thought did come to her mind, however. She swung the dagger and threw it straight at the boy. Then, one of the snakes tried to cover him with itself. Marta found this interesting. It's funny that she didn't notice it right away. Now she has an understanding of what needs to be completed. She raised her scepter and a huge stream of energy was released from it. Martha directed all her power towards them. Suddenly, one snake appeared on Isabella's hand. It wriggled and tried to bite her. She tried to throw it off, but it was all to no avail. At some point, she jerked her hand so sharply that it came loose. The snake fell to the ground and did not move. The remaining two looked at them with furious eyes. These were high-ranking monsters, and she was able to deal with them herself. They were in pain, they were dizzy, they seemed exhausted. Isabella had told Martha before that these were advanced monsters, and that she was a little weird, and that they were pretty smart. Exhausted, they just sat in a heap and talked among themselves. Isabella clenched her fist, laughed loudly, and asked who wanted to bite her next. Then they looked at each other and said that they would not do it anymore, no matter what smell was coming from her. Isabella focused on what they said was a delicious smell. She looked at her hand, which one of the snakes had managed to bite through. Blood dripped onto the floor, and the snakes simply watched. Isabella asked what to do with them, because they were disgusting, so stupid that you wanted to kill them. But nevertheless, they have a high level and think, communicate. You need to dig up some information through torture, she answered. Isabella was already about to leave. Then she felt someone's gaze on her and turned around abruptly. It was Christopher. He came running to the sounds of the battle, but it was already over. Isabella asked where he came from. It seemed to him that something was wrong with the barrier. He went to check it, and there was the owner of this head. He had to get rid of him. But he assumed that the real monster was the boy she captured. She's not sure, but maybe that boy stole the chimera fragment. Christopher pointed his sword at him and asked why he was still alive. The boy ran up to her, fell to his knees and hugged her legs. It seemed to Christopher that she was not satisfied with just him and began to tame all the monsters. The boy continued to call her, but Isabella only asked him to shut up. Christopher noticed that she was hurt and took her hand with a very worried expression on his face. He looked at her with warmth, and there was also playfulness in his gaze. When he tried to drink her blood, she pulled her hand back and covered his mouth with her hand. At this moment, he felt very awkward. He also asked Marta to take care of everything. It was dangerous for him to stay here. When she asked if he was sure, he was silent for a second. At that moment, he thought only about Isabella and her well-being. He expected this, but he really suffers. Even in human form, first they need to determine if he is poisonous. The boy said that there was no poison in it. But if that was a lie, Grace would immediately cut off his head. So he changed his answer and said that there was. Then she came up to him and started to pat him. It was painful for him, because he had a fever and the wounds were burning badly. The boy asked the lady to save him, but he bit with his poisonous fangs. Then he promised that from that moment on, he would obey only her. Marta asked to minimize her movements and take a rest. She will quickly analyze his poison and make an antidote. Then she grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and dragged him along with her. Isabella hoped that everything would be fine, but thoughts of killing him never left her. Isabella lay in bed, completely out of strength for anything. Oliver and Grace screamed that they would just get rid of this bastard. But you can't just get rid of him. Let him send him to hell in the most painful way. She also asked them to be a little quieter. They were concerned about her well-being. Grace ran for a doctor, but Isabella simply drove them away. Now she just wants to relax. Hearing a click, she opened her eyes. It was Christopher. But how could she tell him that she was in mortal pain when he had that face? She grows dull, as if she had caught a cold. She wonders whether he is alive or not, because Oliver will not stand on ceremony with him. For now, Martha is practicing on it, but everyone knows that she will practice on it until it dies. Christopher was worried about whether she liked him, but she didn't even say that, so he said he was lying, because she protected him when he tried to kill her. They need to get information out of him, because this is all for him. Christopher was most worried that he would put her in danger, but she laughed it off and said that if anything happened, she could escape. He asked what he should do then, catch her or let her go. The sorceress was right. Because of her, he could get hurt. If he's talking about yesterday, then it wasn't that dangerous. He started talking about her blood, a huge thirst to make it his own, not leaving a single hair for anyone. From head to toe, he wants to eat it all. He apologized because he started talking like a real asshole. Christopher didn't even drink her blood, but now he's in a hurry to eat it. Maybe he is mistaken about something. Does he really think that the truth will be able to eat her? If the danger that Khan spoke of was related to his appetite, there would be no need for her to run away. That's why she suggested that they greet him with a fist right away until he came to his senses. He laughed. A beating to bring him to his senses was quite suitable for him, and he said to scold him if he didn't obey. At that moment she blushed. Christopher hoped most of all that it would be bullshit. In the end, everything goes as the sorceress said. He still doesn't know. After all, what's the point of Isabella becoming poison to him if he drinks her blood, be it appetite or anything else? He rubbed his head. The sorceress was worried about it. He told Isabella that he wanted to eat her, but he threw everything into one heap, because he meant not only literal appetite. He was clearly violently seized by dual desires, to chew Isabella whole and to be intoxicated by her. He didn't feel this way as a wolf. Christopher tensed a little as someone began to enter the room. It was Oliver. He wanted to talk. What worried him was that this time the Empress was targeting Isabella and not him. His words were true. Christopher confirmed them. He also beheaded the monster that was hunting Isabella yesterday. They're always looking for a woman, and the only women they can hunt are Martha and Isabella. Oliver believed that it was all because of him. Isabella was haunted by monsters since childhood, and she suffered. Because of this, her character changed diabolically. All she wanted was to return to normal life. He tries to convey to him that he destroyed Isabella's peaceful life. Christopher understood this without him. After meeting him, she constantly gets into trouble, but he can't let her go. He's just not capable of it. Then Oliver said that he just needed to take responsibility. Christopher looked at him in surprise, because he did not expect such words. He thought that Oliver would tell him to disappear. Even if he asked, he still would not listen. This does not mean that one should contact her more than necessary. Let her not think some nonsense. She has plenty of knights. It would be too much if the crown prince was treated like a simple knight. Christopher, that you wouldn't protect her if you had to. He put his hand on his heart and said, at the cost of his life, his gaze full of confidence in his words. Isabella has decided to go to Jito. She has a deal that cannot be missed. Oliver scratched his head and said that she would go with him. It was originally planned that it would coincide with Isabella's coming-of-age ceremony. But in such a situation, nothing could be done. Even though he will catch the eye of the Empress, he will still be the focus of her attention. Since it has come to this, now it is their turn to get on her nerves. Oliver also reminded him about the wine that Christopher promised him. He laughed and told him, any time, you can drink until you burst. The boy ran into the room and shouted, Mistress! They exchanged glances. The boy was a little scared. Christopher grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and threw him straight into the wall. He asked him if he was going to apologize for what he did. The boy sat on his knees, his head down, and only quietly said, I'm sorry I hurt you. This is how Isabella lives, and all the monsters apologize to her. The only monster she knows drools and throws it at her. Since it's a high-level monster, it might be useful to have it nearby. Christopher asked if now that he had done his job, he could kill him. The boy ran up and jumped right into her arms, begging her to let him live. She asked not to call him mistress, because they were enemies. But he said with tears in his eyes that they were no longer enemies, but on the same side. She had thought so before, but now she was sure that something was wrong with his ear. But that was normal, because he was still young, Martha said. She smiled and added that in human years, he was about 10 years old. Isabella felt the hair on the back of her neck rise. 10 years old. He was still just a child, flashed through her mind, and her heart sank at the thought. The boy suddenly took her hand, his fingers cold but strong. Mistress, he whispered, and there was a strange devotion in his voice. After everything he had done, he is big enough and will be able to protect her. A street shootout flashed through Isabella's mind. How could he protect me, even if he was weaker than me, she thought. But she didn't say a word out loud. Isabella put her hands on her hips and asked his name, but he had no name. She was surprised that the Empress did not give him a name. Now his name will be Lumion, Isabella said. The boy opened his mouth, and 3 pairs of glowing red eyes stared at her from the darkness. The snakes hidden inside looked at her with curiosity. Isabella held her breath, as if expecting some kind of trick. She immediately remembered shooting rainbow snakes. The 3 snakes began to argue furiously, their hissing filling the room. If he, Lumien, then who are we? One asked. That name should go to me, insisted the other. Martha and Christopher turned their heads to the side to avoid meeting her eyes. Isabella immediately realized that they weren't even going to help her. Her face darkened as she continued to listen to their argument about who would get the name. "Enough!" Isabella shouted sharply. "If they can't agree, then each of them will get what's theirs. One snake is now named Lou. The second snake got its due, M.I. The third was content with the last, N. No matter how beautiful he was, Isabella couldn't stand snakes. She turned to Lumion and asked him not to release his snakes anymore. All the snakes agreed and went back into the boy's body. "Her cuteness is a drawback. First, we need to clean up." These creatures were aiming at His Highness. He wasn't okay, but there was nothing she could do about it because she cared. This is the Empress's assistant. He thinks she will have to let him go back to where he came from. It didn't matter. He was her only puppy. He just didn't like that bastard getting inside. He smiled and asked her to be nice only to him. Grace smiled, because everything turned out well. There was a knock on the door. It was Isabella. The ram was surprised that she was already okay. She decided that she had caught a cold and therefore had a good rest. He invited her in. She would have to go to Jito with His Highness. But he had already heard the news from her brother. Apart from the plot of the novel, she avoided Jito because she didn't want to get involved with the Empress. As long as she recognizes her as her enemy, nothing else matters to her. And she doesn't know when another monster will be sent to disturb her sleep. It would be much safer to be inside the fence of their family's estate. Everything got confused after meeting Christopher, but the end goal did not change. Her goal was always to lead a peaceful and comfortable life. She herself asked, how about a preliminary demonstration of Asila's work at the banquet in honor of His Majesty's birthday? It is better to do this in advance. In addition to the nobles and Jito, noble people from each province will come. If they show the decorations at the right time, the result will certainly be excellent. She clasped her hands and asked if, since he was going, she should go too. Simon even jumped up. Because it was she who had to do it. She had the necessary influence in Jito, so that they would get the necessary PR effect. Nobody likes it if a boring old man does it. The influence the Baron speaks of is actually rumored to be from the bad class. She will do what she must. It is all for money. She must endure it, even if it is annoying, Isabella thought. She also understands that there is little time left, but it would be nice to ask Asila to make other accessories. Isabella thought it would be better to make them for her parents, and also for their older brothers, since they were going to promote the jewelry. The Baron was surprised, and then asked if she had any ideas yet. She thought that she needed to prepare brooches for her father and brothers. And for Mother, a necklace, a ring, and earrings. Isabella knows there are only 10 days left, but it would be great if they could make it. But he hopes that Asila won't give up on it. Simon asked her not to worry. The accessories that would be presented at this banquet had already been prepared, and were now in the final stage, so her request was quite feasible. The Baron did not let us down, even at the final stage. She plans to make a contract with a wizard, so that magic can be placed into a processed mana stone. Simon reminded her about the guy who came, because she really praised his skills. If everything suits him, then she is not against signing a contract. Now, there is only one person left. She handed him a piece of paper and said, "If possible, let them do this first." Simon looked at the sketch carefully and asked what it was. She smiled and said that this was a piece for the prince, since it had come to this, and that they should not make Christopher the best model for Carcel's jewelry. Simon immediately realized that this was a great sales boost, so he would do everything in the best possible way. Lumion screamed and begged not to leave him with this witch. Oliver asked if it was necessary to keep it near him. The prince agreed. It was necessary to take something beautiful, but you never know what might happen if you leave it alone. But if they warm it up, then they may be the ones in danger. She agreed that if he started acting up, they would kill him. Isabella was outraged that Oliver and Christopher had become so close. They get along well. The prince jumped up to Isabella, noticing that something was wrong with her. She covered her mouth with her hand. For some reason, she felt unwell from the carriage ride. Christopher will ask Martha to examine her first. It is best to stop. Otherwise, she will simply faint. Isabella turned to His Highness, and he looked at her questioningly. Then she asked him to shut up. He felt somehow awkward after being overly concerned. Christopher looked offended. Then Oliver said that their Isabella still bites when she's in a bad mood. He suggested that they change places so that she could lie down. Isabella thanked him. She realized that it really looked like she should lie down. Isabella turned away from them and dozed off. Christopher came over and touched her forehead to check how she was feeling. Afterwards, he wished her good dreams. At that moment, she found herself defenseless. Finally, they arrived in Jito. Isabella sat down on the ground. She yawned, trying to wake up from a long sleep. They brought her a glass of cold water. Isabella accepted it with great gratitude. After a couple of sips, she seemed to come to life. Oliver noticed that she had a goat-like voice, although she only drank water, not alcohol. Isabella shut him up, not being in the mood to argue. But as far as he could remember, she only got seasick as a child. She thought that after she got into Isabella's body, everything would change. But for some reason, it became even worse. Oliver asked where the damn wolf was. She tried to convey to him that he needed to speak more quietly, so that no one would hear. How much she would have to listen to if Christopher had stuck to her. Although they were together all the time, if you think about it, he was around longer than Oliver. Maybe it's separation anxiety. The brother asked her if she had feelings for the prince, if she liked him. After she replied that she liked it, Oliver immediately jumped up, anger on his face. Isabella didn't understand why he was yelling at her. She doesn't like him as a friend and likes him as a colleague. It would be good if they remained friends. Oliver asked again. Colleague? But first of all, they are colleagues. She wanted to remain friends, but the prince did not like it. He did not want to be colleagues either. But otherwise, nothing would have happened at all. She is his sister, but if he were a prince, he would throw her on his back and leave. But if not, it makes him angry. It might be that he ate alone and stayed in his room, Oliver suggested. Even though he is disgusted by it, it is very sad to hear this. Christopher looked away questioningly, holding his right shoulder. He covered his face with his hand. For some reason, he suddenly felt sad. Welcome, Your Highness, said Isabella's brother. Yes, they hadn't seen Leonard for a long time. Then, a dark-haired man appeared and said that his face was shining. It was Gale. His face always looks like he's dying. He asked emotionally if he even knew who was causing this. Isabella narrowed her eyes, wondering who this young man was. Her eyes widened as she remembered the glass ball. This is the man they were talking to. He was shouting that if the prince did not come, he would resign. Leonardo greeted Isabella and asked how the trip had gone. Oliver answered for her. He told how she got seasick and how she came back to life. Now she thought about the fact that they still had to go back home and have to go through this a second time. But she was fine, Isabella added. Christopher began to examine her. She didn't look very good. Her face was a bit pale, he said. Isabella took the stone in her hands and asked to prove it. Squeezing my hand, the stone broke into several tiny pieces. Isabella smiled, looked at Christopher, and asked if he was sure. He answered yes. He reached out and put the bracelet on her. While Milady was resting, the prince asked Martha to make it. Thanks to her, everything is just great. The bracelet had healing magic in it, so if she wore it, she would feel better. She was very happy with this gift. If she is happy, then Christopher is happy too. Oliver stroked her head. She asked him to take his hands off her before she made him bald. He was offended that she tolerated this from the prince, but shied away from his hands. While they were sorting things out, their father approached them. They hadn't seen each other for a long time. During all this time, she had grown into a real lady. He had heard from the Baron that Isabella was good at managing business. He placed his hand on her shoulder, his palm warm and heavy. As always, complimentary, he said. And there was a rare note of approval in his voice. But when he added, well done, Isabella felt heat spread across her cheeks. She looked at him tenderly and held her gaze. He was happy to see his daughter and how she had blossomed. Father called Oliver over to hug him, but he was no longer little enough to be hugged. And where did he get such an offspring with his wife's appearance? From the arms of the mother he loves so much, Oliver said. Isabella smiled. Such a warm family relationship. The father was a little surprised. He took a short pause, after which he said how long it had been since he had seen her smile. With a smile, she looked exactly like his daughter, and her mother was already approaching from behind. She said, "Is Isabella more like her?" He was a little worried. Because she wasn't feeling well, she shouldn't have gone out. But she couldn't do otherwise, because her favorite troublemakers had arrived. She opened her arms and said, "My children, come to me." Oliver immediately approached, and Isabella remained standing aside for a while. A second later, she ran up to her mother and hugged her with all her love. When did she manage to grow so much? She thought. Isabella just broke into a genuine smile. Is she really smiling at her now? It's so amazing. Father came up from behind and hugged them all. They stood like that for a while, enjoying the moment. Isabella collapsed on the bed. She had eaten too much. It was hard to even breathe. Her parents passed her one dish after another for her to try, but she couldn't even appreciate them all. But with this bracelet, she felt a little better. Isabella lay on her side and began to examine him, and then she realized that she envied the real Isabella. The Duke's family, good people, past, future, and present. Even when Isabella rose up, hand in hand with the Empress, the Duke tried to save his daughter's life. He did not cover for Isabella, who had committed an unforgivable sin, let alone surrender. The Duchess gave such unchanging love, so she does not understand why Isabella has changed. Even though she grew up as a spoiled girl, it was not the environment to be dishonest. When her name was called, she screamed, swore when her body was touched. Isabella demanded many bad things. She was hopeless. She clearly remembers how she insulted everyone, but for some reason, she doesn't remember her childhood. She only has memories from the age of 10. Isabella had to cope somehow. She lay down on the floor and tried to find something under the bed. She clearly remembers that the bracelet rolled under the bed when it fell off her hand. Isabella reached out to get it. Here she found something that looked like a bracelet, but it was tied with some kind of thread. Suddenly, a storage room in the floor opened up, containing children's things. This is not Isabella's taste, although she may have liked it as a child. In addition to children's toys, she found a diary. Opening it, she began to laugh loudly. It was written there, Oliver, an idiot, tortures her with lizards. She will definitely take revenge. The artist is bad from the word. Today, her older brother Leonardo took her. She was supposed to grow up just as big and ride him on his back. Her parents were asked who she looked like more. She answered that she looked like Leonardo's brother. She lied because her parents expected too much from her. Dad would cry if he found out, so she had to keep it a secret. Isabella seemed like too sweet a child in her diary. Maybe Isabella just hit her head one day. But one page confused her very much. It said that if she went to the palace, she would run into the Empress. She didn't want to go there. Grace looked at my lady and asked what was wrong with her beautiful face. Her skin is glowing, her eyes are lined with charcoal, and she appears to have huge bags under her eyes. She couldn't sleep for a long time, thinking about the Empress in the diary. The maid came up and asked her to come with her. They prepared a bath for her, asked her not to be afraid, because they would be kind. But she was still confused by the strange look. They grabbed her and dragged her away. She only managed to scream, "Grace, help!" But she just waved her hand and said that everything would be fine. Looking at her face in the reflection of the mirror, she had no idea what had happened. Her face seemed to glow and was like new. She thanked the maids. Suddenly, she noticed that something was wrong. Everything had changed dramatically. She is not afraid. In the duchy, everyone was trembling. But here she feels awkward, because everything is different. One of the maids asked if everything was okay with her. There was some slight worry on her face. Isabella said she was just looking back at her old self, wondering what she was like in their eyes. The maid said that she was the perfect mistress, sweet, beautiful, and even affectionate. She was the most sincere girl, be it an animal or a person. When she saw that someone was sick, she caught them all. Over time, Isabella changed a lot. Now everything is finished. The gift from Asila's workshop suited her very well. It matches perfectly. Now they can set off on their journey. Oliver asked how the bracelet was, to which Isabella replied that it was just great. Now she has experienced her older brother's power herself, but she knows that it was Eugene who did it. It was he who ordered Eugene to do it. Everything was clear to her. Isabella simply thanked him. At that moment, Oliver even blushed and shook his head a little. He took her friend, and they headed to the castle. The music was playing, and all the people slowly began to gather in the center. The two girls began to whisper. They were not very happy about Isabella's arrival because of the rumors that were circulating about her. Oliver noted that she had a bad reputation, but she wasn't the only one with a bad reputation. He looked at her and asked her not to do anything that would benefit the Empress. But she knew that, even without him. They were introduced, His Majesty the Emperor, the Empress Mother, the second prince. Their acquaintances in the past were not exactly strange, but still awkward. She had avoided the Empress as a child. Although what could have changed in 6 years, she thought. Suddenly, her gaze fell straight on Isabella. She was extremely upset to see her here. Well, what can we say about Isabella? She herself is not delighted. She didn't understand whether it was hostility or doubt. But Isabella knew one thing for sure. The Empress did not love her. Absolutely all the people who were in the hall paid attention to her. Isabella was confused as to why everyone was staring at her. She leaned her arm against her brother and took a fan to cover her face. She doesn't remember what happened between her and the Empress when she was a child. Honestly, she doesn't remember anything. But it seems like something happened. Ole would have brought her here if something had happened. Isabella began to ask him pointedly what he was hiding from her and why he was mumbling. He waved his hand and replied that there was no point in disturbing the Empress. There was no need for her to meet with her. She had to be a realist. But she understood perfectly well that Oliver was hiding something. Now that she has thrown out all the bad thoughts, she must look in that direction. As expected, she began to smile sincerely. Christopher shines even brighter, especially his eyes. They are like the moon. Isabella realized that something was wrong here. Oliver looked at her with incomprehension. She immediately noticed that His Highness's eyes had become darker. But how could Oliver know this, since he didn't even look closely? Someone called out to her from behind, apologizing, and Isabella turned her head warily. It was a girl with pink hair, she asked. You are Mrs. Carcel, aren't you? She bowed and said, Let me introduce myself. Anisha Durkin, second daughter of the Marquis Ducan. She was very polite and invited Isabella and Oliver to join them. She responded with a smile. Yes, of course. She couldn't even imagine that the time had come for her debut. Anisha folded her hands in front of her and said, Oh my God. Is it possible that she is wearing that very necklace from Asila's workshop? Isabella carefully tucked her hair behind her ear and replied that it was a gift for her coming of age. Everyone began to admire her earrings. They were even more beautiful than those worn by Countess Jirel. They wondered if they were also magical or not. She replied, Yes. In this dangerous world, she needs tools for protection. It's scary to walk alone because of the monsters. Therefore, such trinkets can only be obtained from the Kartsili. They will definitely buy it when they have the opportunity. Isabella's gaze shifted to the side. She is curious why Christopher is standing there. Afterwards, she noticed that he was looking in her direction. His gaze was different, as if it was not him at all. Isabella's face darkened. She knew there would be some kind of catch. She didn't understand what was wrong with his eyes. The best solution was to keep an eye on him, because she hadn't done anything to make him behave this way. Anisha put her hand on her shoulder and said that Isabella didn't look well, and she was worried about her well-being. She asked her to change. It seems she hasn't recovered from the road yet. She'll go get some fresh air. Anisha said that as soon as she rests, let her come back. He could have thought that he would be left alone. I forgot to ask if she could join. As expected, he can't look at her. When she asked why he was angry, since she was worried about the reason for such a sudden change, he asked her to leave. Christopher once said that he would never let her go. He asked what she was doing, but she wouldn't leave until she found out the reason for this attitude. Christopher replied that there was no reason, so she asked if he thought it made sense. Until yesterday, everything was fine. Suddenly it dawned on her. He is not His Highness. He was outraged by this tone. And then Isabella asked him if he was having fun making fun of her, pretending to be His Highness. If he was planning on deceiving people, he needed to be much better prepared. He thinks that we should stop this conversation. Judging by his calmness, they clearly know each other. Since he can't say what to do, she turned and walked away, thinking that the best solution would be to ask Leonardo later. Suddenly, she saw her brother and looked at him in surprise. Leonardo asked what she was doing here. His Highness seemed strange to her. It turned out that it was a fake. Apparently, he already knew about it. Leonardo and the fake Christopher met eyes. He did his best not to seem strange. Leonardo asked how she understood this. Isabella looked the fake over from head to toe and began to describe it. The eye color is noticeably different. Christopher's are bright yellow. There was no way His Highness would just pass her by. And Isabella continued to explain to them further. But that's not so important now. She's more concerned about where His Highness is now. She doesn't know if something might happen if the culprit is found. But Leonardo can't reveal this secret. Until he answers, Isabella won't move and will continue to pester him. He asked her to go and rest, not to make a scene here. Here she turned sharply to add something. I approached this guy and said, Mr. Fake. And then she added, we'll see each other next time, but with a different face. Isabella knocked on the door and addressed Martha. She carefully opened the door and grabbed her dress. Then, with lightning speed, he dragged her towards him. Isabella's face turned pale as she saw Silver Fur. His Highness was glad to see her. He wagged his tail and barked softly. Isabella asked what happened and if they could explain. Christopher started barking, but she didn't understand him. So she stood up and asked Martha to explain it to her. A trembling shudder of fear flashed across her face, and her features froze in gloomy severity. Christopher grabbed Isabella and tried to bite her face, but Martha didn't understand it all that way. Isabella was still smiling sweetly. She gently asked him to let go, and he obeyed. There was warmth in the corners of her lips, as if the summer sun had dissolved in them, and her eyes, like the quiet waters of a lake, reflected serenity. Most likely, he wanted to show his affection in this way. It probably meant that he wouldn't hurt her or eat her, but to him, it looked completely different. In any case, peace is only a dream for them. 5 years have passed, but Martha still cannot get used to His Highness's canine appearance. Christopher got angry and started growling at her, but she didn't understand why he was angry if it was true. He started barking emotionally, but Martha had no idea what he was saying. Isabella's blood is poison to him, and it seems dangerous for him to drink it. They wondered if the Empress noticed this, but most likely she did. She is the only one who could commit such a disgusting act. Although, if he can turn into a wolf, then what is the difficulty in returning to his previous state? Isabella thought. And why then she could not turn Christopher into a wolf? She asked Martha if she thought it was the Empress who turned him into a wolf. She wasn't sure, but she assumed it was. She thinks it's all a magic stone. Judging by the reaction in the palace, they are placed everywhere. It seems that they were used as a basis for the poison that was used on His Highness. The world, of course, has retained its foundations. Even if something changes, the foundations remain unchanged. But what if the Empress was trying to turn Christopher into a wolf? Thoughts were spinning in her head. There's no mention of this in the book, but it's possible that Hannah was the one trying to prevent this. Then it was even more dangerous. Isabella couldn't resist and hugged Christopher. This will happen again and again. Martha, of course, does not want to speak so confidently, but she cannot compare with her. Martha is apparently talking about the Empress. However, she feels left out because of Hannah, but she understands that she can stand up for herself and forgot to encourage her because she is a good sorceress. Martha's spirit was strong. She could not be broken, and she never doubted her abilities. She grabbed the door handle and said she needed to do some investigating. Martha stormed out of the room, apologizing and saying they would see each other soon. Christopher hugged her with his paws and began to lick her face. Apparently, he was trying to comfort her. She turned him over and jumped on him, saying, "He's so cute." Then she added, "Isn't it unpleasant to receive such a kiss?" Her face changed in an instant. Isabella even tensed up a little. Christopher looked at her with a kind of angry look, after which he came closer and sniffed. She tried to stop him, but he still attacked, just not for the blood. It looks like they have a problem. She gives him blood for the first time after Hannah's warning. Christopher walked towards her with a guilty look. She warns him in advance that if he does it again, she thinks there will be problems. He asked as if he was mocking her, as if he couldn't just try. She replied that it was possible. But what if something bad happened? Christopher reassured her that he knew his body, and what could he possibly know if he couldn't even see her normally? Isabella warned him one last time. When he started to approach her with a grin, she flicked him in the face. He lay down and pressed his paw to his head, as if sparks were flying. Isabella just wanted him to come to his senses. Christopher said, "Cruel woman." She just smiled and said, "Stop, you pervert wolf." And how dare she call a young and decent man that? But a decent and young man would not bring his lips so close. He was indignant because she herself allowed it. She put her hand on her chest and asked when it was. But when he kissed her, she reciprocated. Christopher mimicked her about who our cutie was, and she was surprised that he heard everything. She probably thought he was just a normal dog, but she didn't even suspect that he was conscious. He was himself until the very end, Martha heard him swear. That's why he was so determined. It turns out his mind is in the right place. Then the question arose as to why he bit her head. As it turned out, he just wanted to. Returning her mind is only half the battle. She hopes that at least something has changed for the better. She covered her mouth with her hand, looking away thoughtfully. Her lips trembled. So many conflicting thoughts fought inside. At this point, Christopher apologized, and Isabella was even a little surprised. "I shouldn't have," he said without looking up, his ears still wolfish, flat against his head, his whole posture screaming remorse. Isabella immediately noticed this pitiful expression on his face, the same one that once made her melt and forgive him for all his pranks. So she opened her arms to hug him, and she said, "Come here," meeting him with a smile. He rushed towards her so quickly that he almost knocked her off her feet, his face glowing with happiness and his tail wagging madly, hitting the floor. They sank to the floor, and Christopher pressed himself against her, and Isabella, laughing, ran her fingers through his thick fur. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. Only this quiet, warm moment. Hannah would be horrified to see this scene. "He is dangerous," she would probably scream. To be honest, she would be lying if she said she wasn't afraid. Fear was quietly stirring somewhere deep inside, reminding her of the warnings. After Hannah's warnings, a worm of doubt settled in Isabella's soul. She could no longer look at Christopher the wolf with the same carefree trust as before. Each of his sharp fangs reminded her that he was indeed capable of biting her throat out in one motion, and her whole body tensed at the thought. But still, she can't help but believe those clear eyes. Christopher felt her heart beat fast, thinking that she was scared, but she is only a little worried, because he might bite her throat. Then he asked why she didn't run away, to which he replied that she trusted him. She really trusts him a lot. After these words, Christopher grabbed her neck. Isabella realized that he enjoyed tormenting people, but she didn't understand why he bit her throat after she trusted him. But he couldn't help himself after those words. Then she gave him an ultimatum. If he did something like that again, she would not let him near her again. Isabella began to examine her neck. She was simply horrified, because now she doesn't know how she can go out in public looking like this. If he ever returned to human form again, she would no longer wait for him at all. Anyway, they're in trouble. If Oliver sees this, he'll be really angry. She can't walk like that. So she decides to cover the wound. Someone knocked on the room. She hoped it was Martha. Another assumption was that the Empress had sent someone. She walked up to the door and put her hand on it. At that moment, she was called out. This voice seemed very familiar to her. "It's me, madam," said the girl. She asked to open her door. She was at the banquet as Christopher's partner, so Hannah's appearance was not surprising. Now that things had gone wrong, I expected that the teacher, the Lord of the Mage Tower, would be nearby. She continued to knock on the door, asking for it to be opened. Isabella looked to Christopher for advice on what to do, but he only advised her to simply open the door. What she was most worried about was that he would be caught. But Christopher wanted to ask her something. Do the main characters really meet as a rule? She ran to open the door with great enthusiasm. When Hannah entered the room, Isabella asked what happened. As if darkness were enveloping her, she carefully approached Isabella. Then she moved a strand of hair from her neck to examine it. She screamed and said that it was for this very reason that they should stay away from each other. Christopher called Isabella to him. Hannah covered it with her hand, but she didn't understand why she was hiding it. She only added that it was too dangerous, although perhaps the most dangerous person was Hannah. She sees that His Highness is too self-confident, but the curse has not yet been lifted. He had already asked her to watch her language, but she remained as stupid as she was. Then the picture formed in her head. Apparently she knows. Hannah knows that Christopher is the crown prince, and that he is cursed. She asked her when she found out. "He seems to have known for a long time," Christopher said. It turns out that she knew that it was His Highness, but in fact she only found out about it today. Hannah would never have thought that the person who was cursed was the crown prince himself. They stood and seemed to be glaring at each other. Isabella stood to the side and simply watched. If everyone knew about his identity, he would hardly have that collar on. But she would have thought about it if he were human, but would not succumb to any demons. The atmosphere in the room was too tense, so Isabella addressed both of them at once. After which she screamed, "Enough!" Forgot asked how she knew and how she found them. Christopher immediately expressed his opinion. Perhaps she came in a hurry because she was afraid that he might eat her. And he hit the nail on the head. She was afraid that the young lady could end up in His Highness's stomach because of the magic that had entered the palace. She learned of their location using spatial magic. That's why she kept asking for the door to be opened. Now, Isabella was interested in how she learned about magic and whether she could tell her more about it. She reached into her pocket to get something, after which she handed her the stone, which was hidden in the palace. I don't know how it happened, but there is magic inside him that brings out the monster instincts in the prince. She is very sensitive to such things, so she can understand right away. If she had managed to do it before His Highness, she could have stopped it, but she was too late. As expected, Hannah is to blame for Christopher becoming a wolf, because she was supposed to be there for him. What she was most interested in was whether there was any way to stop this, and how she should act in the future. It may be difficult now, but she will definitely try to help. After these words, Isabella jumped up and ran to her. She said she could ask for anything she wanted. Hannah asked her to promise to be careful with blood in the future. Even if he asks her to stay away from him, he still won't listen, she added. With her hand, Hannah touched her neck and healed the wound she received from Christopher's fangs. She smiled and said, "Madam, take care of yourself." She's sorry she's only talking about it now, but she really cares about her. Hannah is worried because it is rare to meet people with their blood, but it is not entirely unusual. She had met people like that before. They were very good. The husband had rare blood like the lady, and the wife was a demon. But they even adopted a child like a normal family. They thought they had true love, but their love, as sad as it may sound, turned out to be unsuccessful. The wife could not resist the temptation, and, cutting out her husband's heart, chewed it and swallowed it. When she came to, she was so shocked that she could not bear it and killed herself. Unfortunately, the child also died. Their relationship is similar to that couple's relationship, so she wants them to distance themselves. If His Highness tastes the mistress's blood, he will crave her more and more. And eventually he'll eat her, and she'll just die. Hannah's eyes seemed to say, "Run right now." But this was not in Isabella's plans. She forgot about escaping when she began to give her blood to Christopher. Christopher stood up, reached out to Isabella, and licked her face. Moreover, even His Highness will not run away. He asked if there was any way to suppress his thirst. But the answer was no. He had to cope with it himself. But she's not sure Christopher can do it. If they want to be together, they need to remove the curse. If they become human again, the thirst for blood will disappear naturally. Hannah stood up and wanted to ask a question. She took Isabella by the hand and asked why she did not leave His Highness and go away with her. Hannah looked at her sweetly, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I forgot and didn't expect such a turn of events at all." She immediately imagined a picture of Hannah holding her in her arms and His Highness trying to stop them. It looked strange to her. Why was she flirting with her and not with Christopher? Christopher immediately jumped off the couch and pushed Hannah off her feet, saying, "Leave her alone." She even held her breath. What a shame. Isabella had already promised to be by his side for the rest of her life, and they started their music again. Then Isabella stood up and asked His Highness to stop, to think about his status. He was outraged that she was scolding only him. Now he would die from injustice. Hannah pointed her finger at him and told him not to fall for this bait. She asked her to stop too, after all. She was the second son of the empire, even though you wouldn't know it from looking at it. She's also offended. She's just trying to protect her. She asked them to be friends, judging by their behavior, and not just a perfect couple and very suitable for each other. After these words, they looked in her direction with a furious gaze, but it was not necessary to react so sharply. But they really are perfect for each other. So she suggested on this wonderful note that they get closer. Hannah doesn't make friends with monsters, much less demons. Never. Not for any amount of money. She doesn't know how Isabella came to this conclusion, but they will never get closer. Christopher doesn't need anyone else but her. But fate itself connected them, and Isabella is just an obstacle between them. Christopher asked her not to bring up the subject again, and he said she'd better get out of here if she was done. Then she stood up for Hannah, because he shouldn't drive her away. She took her hand and asked her to stay until Martha arrived, and to be good friends with the prince. She thought it would be impolite to refuse, so she agreed. Since that's the case, they decided to tell a little about themselves. Isabella started first. She is 18, and soon there will be a ceremony of her coming of age, and her hobby is playing with His Puppy Highness. Her favorite food is always changing, but lately she really likes apple pie. After speaking, she brought her hand to Christopher and stroked him. 21, Isabella, Christopher said. Then she asked if she was food, to which he replied, yes, but there is a limit to jokes. Hannah sat and watched all this cuteness that was happening between them, after which she also decided to introduce herself. She is 19, hobbies, magical research, favorite foods, number. Isabella decided to suggest having lunch together. If His Highness was uncomfortable, they could eat together. If they don't want to be friends, she will become friends and then propose to them. And Isabella extended her hand and said, let's be friends. Hannah happily accepted her offer. Christopher, as expected, snorted in displeasure. That's good, Isabella added. Hannah stood up and asked for forgiveness. She would have to leave because the teacher was calling her. She looked out from behind the door and said, see you later. Isabella immediately noticed that Christopher was sulking. This girl took away his personal time, he muttered discontentedly. It pisses him off that he tried so hard to leave a hickey, and she just went and erased it. But she did the right thing, because she can't go out in public like that. But Christopher just wanted to brag. But apparently, he never came to his senses and found something to brag about. He was a little nervous before asking the question. Collecting his thoughts, he asked if Isabella was bothered by her words. She knew everything, so her words didn't surprise her much. She is afraid that she would be lying if she said that those words did not shock her at all. The tragic story of two lovers was indeed a real shock. However, she knew that Christopher could attack her at any moment. But it was good that no abnormalities were found in His Highness. But either way, she's putting herself in danger, he said. Then she replied that this was said by the one who, with drool at his mouth, asks for a sip of her blood every time. He doesn't hate Hannah, but he has no great desire to get closer to her, and I'm sure she doesn't either. Christopher was right. Hannah was much friendlier with her than with him. He said that they could be friends, but there was no need to force him to do the same. Isabella understands that she shouldn't put pressure on His Highness. First, she should get closer to Hannah. Martha burst into the room, frightening Christopher and Isabella with her sudden appearance. She looked very disheveled, and there was a look of worry on her face. Isabella asked worriedly what was wrong with her face, but at the moment it didn't matter. Martha started asking her if she had seen anything strange at today's reception. She also noticed that His Highness was now speaking. Now it was clear, he answered the blood of my lady. But now the conversation was about something else. She handed her a red stone. It was similar to the one Hannah had shown. The only difference was the color. Christopher noticed it too. If the black stone increases His Highness's thirst for blood, then this one, on the contrary, weakens it. If there are two stones, there is obviously something else that must not get out of control. It seemed the Empress had teamed up with someone, Christopher suggested. Most likely, if it is a monster, then everything matches, either a high-ranking monster or even a demon. And what could the Empress be thinking about? Letting a monster into the palace. How was she going to destroy the prince this time? Isabella thought. Marta asked her to be careful. Whether she is connected to what is happening or not, her blood may be attracted to the monster, so she should return home as soon as possible. And why should she suffer because of the Empress? Somehow it's all unfair. With her earrings and pendant, of course, you don't have to worry about anything. The place ahead was too dark. She was more afraid of ghosts than people. She squinted to take a closer look, worried that someone might jump out at her from the darkness. Stopping, she saw a girl in front of her. She wanted to move back so quickly that she tripped and fell. The girl who came out of the darkness recognized her. It was Lady Anisha Ducrane, daughter of the Marquise Ducrane, whom they met at the ceremony. Anisha gave her her hand and helped her up. She was looking for her. Their conversation was quite strange, as was her behavior. Anisha reached out to her, put her hand on her cheek, and said that she was jealous because she wanted to look like that too. It was as if she hadn't heard her at all. She was acting too strange for being drunk, Isabella thought. Anisha said it smelled good, perfume probably. Which ones do you use? She asked, her gaze both playful and crazy. Well, I forgot, I didn't know, because the maids were spraying her. This body was supposed to be hers. She reached out to her with the words, "Give it to her." Isabella immediately stepped back. The thought crossed her mind to just throw her in the break room. The guy in the hood appeared out of nowhere. He asked her to stand behind him, and he would sort it out. Anisha told him to get out, but he grabbed her mouth with all his strength. She tried to pry his hand away, but to no avail. Then the guy threw her back a few meters. He only added that she shouldn't trust just anyone. Otherwise, it would be all over. Next time, she needs to be the one calling for help instead of playing the hero. Whatever it was, she found it. The girl asked if her name was Isabella Carcel, Chase's youngest daughter. Isabella nodded. Then she asked not to strain herself, because she just came as a test. Here she stopped. The smell of alcohol. Anish didn't smell like that. If she hadn't been drinking. Then why? Without having time to finish her thought, the girl said that it was time for them to go. Then Hannah came up. She was told to wait, but she was worried that they would do something again. The mistress of the Magic Tower Korea. She wondered why the legendary paper needed her, to which she replied that she, an old woman, was just around the corner from retirement. But Isabella did not understand where she was old. Even now she could lay people down with her left hand. Korea asked if she and Hannah were friends, but they were only friends today. Isabella replied, "Well, why didn't she warn me right away that she was dating a friend?" Korea handed her the papers. They were money for treats. She looked like a father who throws money around in front of his children when he's drunk. It was too large a stack for pocket money. This was the scroll of that very Korea. It is most likely worth millions, a spell of movement, attack and defense. She can't believe she got all this through connections. Then she called her, and Isabella turned her gaze to her. Karia suggested that they meet once in her tower. After these words, she seemed to evaporate. Hannah offered her hand and offered to walk her home, but she refused. The teacher told her to keep an eye on her. Then she extended her hand to her. They took each other by the arm and slowly walked towards the palace. Oliver, Leonardo, and Isabella were heading back home. Oliver asked not to assign them any more PR, otherwise he would be fired. Leonardo was of the same opinion. She asked them not to worry, because there would not be a second time. She would also have been better off giving the baton around the banquet hall. Isabella looked out the window, while her brothers discussed how one hen hadn't fallen away from Leonardo at the reception. The beautiful, bright moon illuminated her face. She remembered the meeting. On the other hand, she invited Hannah to her coming-of-age ceremony and thereby promoted her business. So all in all, it didn't go too badly. She really wanted to sleep. 100% when she met Christopher, she would be dozing off. They have a departure at 10 in the morning, so when they get home, they need to get a good night's sleep. Isabella knew that if they told Oliver now, he would throw a whole concert. Moreover, tomorrow she will be in her personal villa. If she comes, he will let himself be touched. How will she say that she succumbed to the temptation of the soft belly and tender bottom of his canine highness? Leonardo said that Isabella was going to the prince's villa. Then he asked why they needed to hide. It seemed to her that he would dissuade her from meeting with his highness. But he didn't mind, because he was the only friend she had. He gave her permission to go, but she had to return before sunset. Then Leonardo said that the trip would take 3 days, at which point he even choked on his chocolate bar. That is, she has now openly declared to him that she will spend the night outside the house and with some other guy. But in fact, not with a man, but with a wolf. The wolf is the prince, and the prince is the wolf, spending 2 nights with a wild animal in an unfamiliar place. Now he tells her not to go anywhere. That's the very reason she didn't want to say anything. Oliver also began to be indignant that Leonardo was letting her go to be torn apart by the wolf. Isabella hopes that he will calm down before arriving home. It annoyed her that he lectured her like an old man, but he only did it because he cared. Leonardo asked the butler to bring what his highness had given him, as if she could send him to the next world. But of course she could. It feels like she's completely obsessed with the guy. How can she go crazy over that shady dog? Oliver asked indignantly. She doesn't think that the person who actually planted this shady cable on her could say that. Leonardo was brought a box, which His Majesty had given him, after which he asked them to stop their empty arguments. Leonardo walked up to Oliver and handed him the box. His Highness said he would understand when he got it. I wonder what trick he was trying to pull again, Oliver thought. He fell to his knees and couldn't believe his eyes. He was so impressed that he didn't even react. The principal also asked not to refuse this gift. Isabella looked at what was in the box and thought it was just simple wine, although perhaps it just cost a lot of money. Oliver put his hand on her shoulder and with a confident face allowed her to go. Hugging the bottle, he headed towards the castle. Isabella even wondered if it was really her brother, who had just recently worked his ass off to persuade her not to go. Isabella asked Leonardo what she should tell her father. But he said with a smile on his face that she needed to talk to him, and now she needed to rest. The father will certainly listen to the words of his eldest son. Pleased, Isabella was about to go to bed, because now she could get a good night's sleep. A boy ran into the room screaming, but he was suddenly pulled back by the scruff of the neck. Grace asked where he was going without her permission. Moreover, she ordered him to keep it clean. Isabella asked not to scare him, because he is still just a child, but not a human, but a monster. She knows this very well, but his mental age is 10 years. She asked him why he was so dirty and began to wipe him with a handkerchief. He was making cookies. Then he covered his nose and said that she smelled, and that this smell discouraged anyone from coming closer. Isabella reprimanded him, because it is not polite to tell your interlocutor openly that he smells bad. She asked Grace if it really smelled like that, but Grace said no. Lumion held out his hand with cookies. This was his gift to her. He had made them himself. Of course, the cooks helped him. He wanted to eat it himself, but he held back for her sake. Grace and Isabella exchanged glances. And then they started laughing, because he is just a charmer and a huge fellow. Isabella said that she would not be home for 2 days. She leaves for His Highness's villa. While she's gone, he'll spend time with Grace. Lumion asked to take him with him. Even though he was afraid of the prince, it was much more frightening to be alone with the younger witch. But we mustn't put my lady in an awkward position. He ran up to Isabella and hid, saying that Grace was a living demon. But no, that meant no. He would have to stay home. He thought it was unfair. It looks like Lumion was seriously offended. She thought that even though he was angry, he would still see her off. Grace asked if she was sure she wanted to go alone, but Isabella told her to rest, as she trusted her more than anyone else. She also asked to make sure that Lumion didn't do anything wrong again. Isabella noticed that when she arrived at her destination, there was deathly silence. Marta offered to walk them to their quarters. She turned her head in different directions and examined the territory. Marta was extremely surprised to learn that they were coming. It was too quiet. There was absolutely nothing here. Rumor has it that ghosts are actually brought here, but Isabella can't stand them, so she asks not to say such things anymore. Leonardo was irritated by this, because he was very tired from the journey and wanted to get to his room quickly. Isabella finally reached her chambers. She was too exhausted. She took her suitcase to unpack all her things. Here, Isabella flinched, because she saw some kind of hand sticking out of the suitcase, so she immediately threw it a few meters to the side. And then she climbed onto the bed, with complete horror on her face. The doll moved, and I immediately remembered all the horror films with Chucky and Annabelle. And about what Martha said, they say that ghosts really do live in this house. She took a pillow and covered herself with it, understanding that she could easily kill the doll. Half a body crawled out of the suitcase. And it even talks, Isabella noticed. Lumion is in the building, he said. How did he even get there? Isabella shouted in question, but then her face softened. She smiled and said what a clever boy he was, but she told him that it was impossible with her. But he supposedly didn't understand what she was talking about. Lumion was just playing hide and seek, and then he accidentally ended up here. You just had to see this miracle. He asked where he was now, what kind of place this was. Here a phrase slipped out from behind him. Isn't it by chance their cutie Lumion? Marta said. He remembers this terrible witch. She rushed in, hearing the screams of my lady, but found the boy. Apparently, he really wanted to play with her. But her assumption was wrong, so she suggested playing with His Highness. Frightened, Lumion ran to Isabella and hid. But there really was a prince standing before him. He is going to finish him off if he doesn't get off Isabella right now, and began to pull him off with his teeth. But he doesn't like it. He can't change his appearance after the transformation for some time, but Christopher was still able to pull him away and began to shake him in different directions. Isabella was just about to buy a new toy for His Highness. It felt like they couldn't agree on who their mistress was. Lumion ran out of the castle and began to run away quickly. He realizes that the best solution would be to stay home. The younger witch may be an icicle, but at least she combed his hair and dressed him up in a cool way. Then Christopher caught up with him and threw him aside. Lumion rolled on the ground. After that, the wolf came up and put his paw on him, pressing him slightly to the ground. But all the boy wanted was for them to leave him alone. Understanding what Isabella saw in him, Lumion does not understand why he is picking on him, because they have made a truce. Tall, broad shoulders, handsome appearance. These are all factors that their owner really likes. She found a lot of things in him, and Lumiere does not reach this level. Christopher added that Isabella would be spending time only with him, so he should not interfere. Lumiere sniffed. The smell was very familiar. Last time, the owner smelled exactly like Christopher, and he was wondering why the mistress was giving off such a strange stench. The boy asked what he was going to do with the mistress, but he was still thinking. Lumiere stood up and shook himself off. He was against Christopher eating her. Either he will do it, or she will do it. He looked at him questioningly. But in the boy's opinion, the second is much more plausible. In that case, Isabella will have to try hard. Leonardo was walking down the corridor and heard some strange sounds. He went into Isabella's room to ask if everything was okay with her. What he least expected was to meet Christopher in her room. Christopher searched the entire room, and Isabella disappeared. Leonardo had a serious conversation with him, but the prince had only one goal: to find his mistress. He always feels Isabella's energy. Christopher sniffed and immediately realized that she was in his room. Isabella sat and read some book in complete silence. With a sharp movement, he threw open the doors to the room. She looked at him softly and asked if they had played enough. Christopher feels so strange that someone is waiting for him. On the one hand, he would pounce on her right now and swallow her whole. Since he didn't say a word, she asked what happened. Christopher remained silent. He would like to capture this image. He understands that he must restrain himself. Isabella's gentle touches and loving gaze only intensify the thirst. She turned to him and asked if he wanted to taste her blood. But Christopher just shook his head, realizing that he couldn't drink her blood anymore. The more she unites him, the more dangerous their relationship becomes. He can lose his sanity at any moment due to an incomplete mark. Isabella asked if he could survive without her blood. He just nodded. Of course he wouldn't be able to talk, but it wouldn't be much of an inconvenience. Isabella noticed that he had matured during the time they had not seen each other. She began to stroke him, seeing how much he liked it. He shows off his charming butt. Christopher realizes that being a wolf isn't so bad. Isabella didn't even notice how she fell asleep in his room. The first thing she decided to do was find Leonardo, because she wanted to eat. She looked at Christopher and said in a soft voice, "Sleep well, I'll be back soon." I went outside and started looking around. The barrier is fine, but we can't let it break like last time. She suggested that we go make a wish since there was still time. As they say, they don't charge for a trial. After the magician became, she did not start believing in any superstitions. But it would be better if she took up practice instead of wasting time, Leonardo said. Isabella crept up behind them and placed her hands on their shoulders, apologizing. And then she asked me to tell her more from that moment on. She just got up, woke up with His Highness, but woke up from hunger. Isabella asked Martha to tell her about the superstition. She told her a legend that has been passed down among the locals from generation to generation. In the very heart of the mountain forest, there is a huge stone that has been guarding its place for 1,000 years. They say that if you stand next to him and sincerely make a wish, it will definitely come true. Some people even think that it is not a stone, but a person. Having listened to this point, she could not contain her curiosity and, like a fool, went into the forest and got lost. She sat down on a stone and thought that it would most likely rain soon. Apparently, she's gone crazy, because how can you believe in some kind of legend? I wonder if she can wait for anyone here. Isabella decided to look first for a place to hide from the rain. She understood that she needed to find some kind of cave or a huge tree. Suddenly, some rustling was heard from the bushes, and she turned around at the same sound. Then there was a bark. She immediately realized that it was Christopher and called him. She couldn't believe her eyes. It was really him. Christopher emerged from the bushes, wondering what she was doing there. He came over and she hugged him really tight and also apologized. Looking at him with a smile, she suggested that they go back down. She even did it a little hastily. Noticing that Christopher was not following her, she asked why he was standing. Apparently, he himself doesn't know the way back home. He only barked. There was a little tension and shame on his face. The sky darkened. Lightning flashed. It looked like they were stuck. There was no other choice. They sat under a tree to at least hide a little from the rain. When Christopher arrived, Isabella thought she was saved. But in the end, there was just one more lost child. He didn't tell the others where he was going. She didn't expect any other answer. He immediately flew out of bed here, judging by the fact that he didn't know the way, he just happened to be nearby. But it's not her fault, His Highness. She herself came here because of the legend. She asked if he could find his way back by scent, but he only shook his head from side to side. After which, he approached the flower and began to sniff it. Now everything became clear to her, namely, why Christopher could not smell. Lilies smell very nice to humans, but monsters find this smell disgusting, and here there are lilies all around. Most likely, it is some kind of shield that protects the villa from attacks by other monsters. Although, everything could be the other way around. Perhaps these are some kind of devices that prevent Christopher from leaving. Or maybe both, but their situation is so-so. Christopher started barking emotionally, so Isabella asked him for a translation. He tried to show with his paw. Then she assumed that he was asking why she came here. She was told that there was a wish-fulfilling stone here. Isabella noticed that he had just smirked at her. The next question was what wish she was going to make. She wished that a handsome man would fall from the sky, and before she could finish speaking, Christopher swept her off her feet. But Isabella saw nothing wrong with this desire. She thought that now was not the time for quarrels, and huge drops of rain fell from the sky. Isabella said that they urgently needed to find shelter. She passed each tree and looked around to make sure she didn't miss any. Soon I came across a cave and was very happy with my find. She shouted to His Highness that she had found the cave. Then her foot touched the edge, and Isabella fell off the cliff. She opened her eyes slightly, her face looking exhausted. Christopher looked down at her with a frightened expression and barked loudly. But his paw also stood on the edge, and he began to fall. The horror that Isabella felt could not be expressed in words. She tried to get up carefully because she did not know her condition. Looking up, she realized for sure that she was alive. But when I came to my senses, I remembered how Christopher fell off the cliff. She started looking around to find him. Her face turned pale. Her eyes were full of horror. Christopher's body lay motionless, unresponsive. There were severe wounds on his side that were bleeding. She begged him to open his eyes, tears streaming down her face. Isabella didn't know what to do. The bleeding wouldn't stop. And what she was most worried about was that Christopher would die. The main characters don't just die, he will survive. The first thing they need to do is get out of the rain. Isabella considered this incident to be her fault. If she had looked under her feet, if she had immediately gone back, realizing that she didn't know the way, everything would have been different. If I hadn't climbed the mountain at all, none of this would have happened. She begged him to forgive her. Christopher raised his head a little and looked at her. He tried to get up, but Isabella also said that he shouldn't get up. Christopher walked up to her and began to lick away her tears. She was so worried. Then she called him a fool. Because first of all, he must think and worry about himself. Isabella hates herself for hurting Christopher. Her blood is poison to him. Then she remembered that blood heals. She reached for her bag in a hurry. It can heal wounds, so she took out a dagger. With a sharp movement, Isabella made a cut on her hand, and she remembers the promise she made to Hannah that she wouldn't use her blood thoughtlessly. But at the moment, she didn't care if Christopher would go wild and attack her. Now it's not important. Every minute counts. She shouted at him to drink blood, but he turned away. Then she told him in a commanding tone to do what she said. Well, when he refused again, she shouted that she would stop him, no matter what he did. She will also do things her own way. Then she opened his mouth slightly, saying that everything was okay. Then she stuck her hand in and told him to drink a lot. Christopher started growling at her, and then he picked up speed and ran straight towards Isabella. She fell to the ground and covered her face with her hands. Christopher stared at her hand with his fangs, his eyes full of rage and ferocity. She believed in him, more than in herself, that he could do it. But Christopher didn't stop. He continued to stand in the same position. Isabella placed her hand on his torso to check the condition of the wounds. Literally, in a couple of seconds, the wounds healed. She asked him to wake up, because she doesn't want someone who hasn't recently been in the next world. But it looks like she has no other options. She had to knock him out, so the fist landed right on his face, and Christopher flew to the side. It seems like she went a little overboard with her power. She put her hand on her face and muttered how it was possible to hit a sick person with all her strength. But there was only one plus. Christopher calmed down. She looked at him tenderly and decided to let him rest a little, because when he wakes up, everything will be fine. Isabella tore the sleeve off her shirt to bandage the wound. She had absolutely no strength, but somehow managed to knock Christopher out. It was unlikely that anyone would come to their aid in such weather, so she decided to light a fire to last at least one night here. When she looked at the floor, she saw that someone had already made a fire here. Apparently, someone, like them, had had an accident. Looking deep into the cave, she thought that there might be branches left inside from previous lost ones. She lit a match to light her way a little. After looking around a bit, Isabella broke into a smile. Indeed, there were several branches lying on the floor. She needed to light a fire quickly. She collected them one by one. Looking closely, she noticed something strange. Everything was too suspicious. But Isabella understood that she had no choice. Walking a little further, she saw that very stone. This was the cause of all her suffering. It was obvious that no smart guy would find the stone in this place. But be that as it may, she folded her hands in front of her and tried to make a wish. She will be too upset if she ends up not making a wish. The most important one is that Christopher wakes up safe and sound. She also asks for her hand to heal. Another wish was that they would be saved after all. She made a wish to resolve all the mess that happened because of her. After standing there for a couple more minutes, she decided it was time to go back. When I turned around, I slipped on a stone. It was not a day, but a mess. She looked at the water and for a second was as if in a stupor. Her sleeve was floating a meter away from her. Probably when she fell, the bandage came undone. Isabella was worried that she might catch some kind of infection here. But when she looked at her hand, she saw that there was not a single scratch on it. She didn't understand how this was possible. She didn't have such abilities. It looks like her wish really did come true. Then, with a confident face, she folded her hands in front of her and said, "Please throw me a handsome guy." But it seems that the stone did not fulfill such wishes. Then, out of nowhere, a man appeared, holding a shining sword in one hand. It was an old man, with long hair and a thick beard, which was braided into a pigtail.